Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of State and Community Corrections to order. And as many of you already know, we're going to do things a little bit different this morning. Number one is we're starting at 9 rather than 10. And the reason is we're going to do an information session on Senate Bill 519. It is a heavy lift for the BSCC, and we thought we should begin the process of informing the board of the many different moving parts that we're working on. Simply said, I'll do that introduction, and the hard worker is coming to the microphone right now. Is Allison, are you going to present, or is Katie? Both of you? Tag team?
Yes, Allison will be starting, Deputy Director Ganter
Yes.
will be starting, but Adam and I would like to go over some new process instructions for how we're doing public comment today.
Oh, you want to do it now rather than at
Would that
10?
be all right? Is that what you wanted to do?
Are we going to do it twice?
I was assuming that this is the start of the meeting. Actually, we're not going to be doing public comment immediately following this. Do you have any advice?
I think
Do the new instructions after the closed session? I think that's probably wise.
Until 10 o'clock because we're going to hold public comment anyway.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll at 10 o'clock or whenever this presentation is finished, we will go into closed session. Only the pertinent people will remain in the room, and following closed session will begin the standard part of the meeting. All right.
I'd like to just give a little intro. Allison will start us off on the slides. Good morning and welcome everyone to the meeting. I'm Katie Howard, the Executive Director here at the BSCC. As Linda noted, we have a significant new set of responsibilities coming to the BSCC with the establishment of the Director of In-Custody Death Review. And in conversations over the summer and in some recent board meeting discussions, we've had a lot of conversation about our inspection responsibilities. Obviously, one of the core responsibilities of this board and our amazing staff. And we asked Allison to provide what we're sort of calling a Facility Inspection 101 presentation. Now, some of the people in the room are very, very well familiar with what the BSCC does in the inspections under Title 15 and Title 24, but we wanted to provide information that may be new or helpful to some of the board members who are newer and have the opportunity to forecast a little bit of what we anticipate coming down the road next year when SB 519 takes effect. So Allison will be covering the first portion, the Facility Inspection 101, and then I'll do the SB 519 overview. And with that,
Super
Deputy
gracious,
Director.
Katie, that I forgot to present the first part, but I appreciate your gentle correction.
Gentleness over here with we should take roll and establish a quorum.
Oh, Lordy.
I know.
Adam,
Off script.
Chair Penner,
here.
Mr. McCumber is absent today. Mr. Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Dykes. Here. Ms. Chavez,
Here.
Mr. Haynes. Here. Mr. Richard.
Here.
Ms. Guard.
Here.
Mr. Mills is absent today. Mr. Budnick is absent today. Ms. Zaragoza,
Here.
Ms. Kumpion,
Here.
and Mr. Groudon is on his way. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. Allison, I think we really are going to be ready for you now.
Okay. Ready? Okay. Good morning, Chair Penner and board members, colleagues and members of the community that are here with us today. I'm Allison Ganter. I'm the Deputy Director of the Facility Standards and Operation and Research Divisions. I'm really looking forward to sharing the FSO responsibilities with all of you this morning. I'm quite proud of our team and the work that we do in the field. We've adapted a lot in the last few years to a more enhanced inspection process, better data collection measures, more time out in the field, and we'll continue to improve our processes as we go along. I welcome questions and feedback. I'll talk about our inspection processes. Katie will talk about SB 519 and then hopefully for questions and feedback at the end. And I welcome all of those. So oh boy. I won't touch the microphone. What I'm going to talk about this morning is our authority for inspections. some of the different types of facilities or all of the different types of facilities that we inspect, our enhanced inspection process and the types of facility inspections we conduct, talk about the inspection process in a nutshell, what it looks like when we begin and walk through and then end an inspection. I want to share a little bit of what we do as opposed to what we don't do in our role. And then I'll hand it one more thing, talking about other areas of oversight in local detention facilities. There are often questions about what other entities or agencies or inspections or investigations happen in local detention facilities. So we have a handful of those to talk about as well. Then we'll hand it over to Katie for a discussion on SB 519, and we will both be available for questions. So I will.
The only thing I would add, Allison,
Sure.
just at this juncture is we're actually going to have public comment following our closed session. And we will address any information items at that time because we're going to have a continuance of information items.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. So first here is the BSCC authority for adult detention facilities. We do have the responsibility to adopt and revise regulations. That's in Penal Code Section 6030. Every 2 years, we're required to review and if necessary, revise. This is very specific to the adult regulations. The last revision that we completed actually was effective in January 1st of this year in 2023. And just for clarity, we talk about Title 15 and we talk about Title 24 inspections. Title 15 are the operational regulations. They guide things like safety checks, medical, mental health, admission, release, those sorts of things. So when you hear Title 15, we're talking about operational regulations. Title 24 are the physical plant regulations. And so that's the distinction between the two. And a really quick note about Title 24, just because this is our opportunity to share as much information possible as we can in a short amount of time. When a facility is built, they are assigned a version, a year, an effective date of Title 24 regulations. So if a facility was built in the 70s and they are under Title 24 regulations from the 70s, unless there's significant build or remodel, they remain under those standards. They're not required to come up to current Title 24 standards. It's an important distinction with Title 24. Title 15 is not like that. An agency has to come up to the Title 15 revisions every few years. Our inspection authority is in Penal Code 6031.1. This includes all local detention facilities. The statute requires us to conduct at a minimum biennial inspections. I'll talk about this a little bit in a moment. We are currently conducting annual inspections. Statute is minimum biennial. We do annual inspections. And then finally, we review all plans for construction. This is in Penal Code Section 6029. This also applies to the juvenile detention facilities. Anytime an agency wants to build a brand new local detention facility or remodel or affect any of the spaces where Title 24 applies, the agency needs to have plan review done through the Board of State and Community Corrections. And what that includes is a letter of intent, the agency signaling that they would like to build or remodel. BSCC staff reviews the plans at each stage, from initial drawings to the final plans that are used for construction. We approve Title 24 throughout each of those stages. We do construction visits, and then finally we conduct a pre-opening inspection. So from start to finish, we're watching the progress to make sure that that agency, that facility or remodel is in compliance with Title 24. The authority for juvenile facilities is mostly the same. There are differences. We have similar responsibility to adopt and revise regulations in Welfare and Institutions Code 210 and 885. They're just split in 210. The authority is for the juvenile halls and the secure youth treatment facilities. And in the 800 section is the camp facilities. And I'll talk about each of the types of facilities in a moment. Inspections, juvenile hall and SYTF, same responsibility at a minimum biennial. And the camps are also located in that 800 section. Again, we are conducting annual inspections of those juvenile detention facilities. What's different in the juvenile, in our juvenile responsibilities, in the Welfare and Institutions Code, Section 209, we have the responsibility to make determinations of suitability when there are items of non-compliance and approved corrective action plan is not submitted, or those items of non-compliance have not been corrected. So that's where there's a significant difference between our responsibility for adult inspections versus juvenile detention facility inspections. The types of responsibility for inspections, regulations, plan review, and suitability. So what types do we have and how many of them are there? There are 450 adult detention facilities in our state. Quick overview of the breakdown. The type 2, the kind of light blue wedge, and the type 3, tiny little wedge. There's 118 of these type 2 and 3 local detention facilities. These are what we commonly refer to as county jails. They are type 2 facilities are intended to be pre-sentenced facilities, and also they've morphed over the years to being a combination of sentenced and non-sentenced individuals. Type 3 facilities are for sentenced individuals only. There's only 2 of those that we know of left in the state. But again, type 2 and 3 facilities, county jails, there's 118 of those. There's 3, that little tiny purple sliver, type 4 facilities. Those are work furlough facilities. There are currently 3 in the state. The yellow wedge, 86 type 1 facilities. These are police departments and sheriff's substations. They are typically smaller, shorter term facilities. They can hold people up to 96 hours upon their arrest. Again, short term, police department, sheriff's substations. Temporary holding facilities, that's the dark blue wedge, 126. Those are also police departments and sheriff's substations. They can hold people up to 24 hours after arrest. And then finally, court holding facilities, 117 of those. Those are run by our sheriff's departments, and those are where people are held during, before, after court appearances. We currently have 10 inspectors to inspect those 450 facilities, adult detention facilities. Again, every single year we go to each of those facilities. Juvenile detention facilities, there are 133 of those. The largest, it's making me think of pie. It is a pie. 44 juvenile halls, the green section, those are typically pre-adjudicated facilities meant to be short-term facilities for young people. We have 39 camps, that's that yellow slice. Those are post-adjudication facilities for young people. 47 secure youth treatment facilities. Those are the newest type of facility here in California. All of those facilities are carved out of existing juvenile hall and camp facilities. None of those are brand new standalone facilities. I wanted to make that distinction, but there are 47 of those. And those are like camps post-adjudication, but also a different type of treatment facility intended for youth with higher needs. And then we have 3 special purpose juvenile halls, which are very temporary in nature, and a young person can be held up to 96 hours. 5 inspectors for those facilities across the state. Again, we're doing those inspections of those 133 facilities on an annual basis. So our enhanced inspection process, which really our inspection process, in the 2021 budget, Governor Newsom directed the BSCC to more actively engage with counties when non-compliance is discovered. And to that end, we implemented this enhanced inspection process that includes, again, annual inspections. We are in the middle of the 2023-2024 biennial inspection cycle. Year 1 is 2023. And again, every facility received a we're almost done, received a comprehensive inspection. That means that they got inspected for every applicable Title 15 and 24 regulation from top to bottom. Next year, year 2, every local detention facility will also get an inspection. There'll be a targeted inspection targeted on items of noncompliance, items of concern that are identified that need looking at, physical plant issues, those sorts of things. They will be targeted, they will be focused. But again, every local detention facility will get an annual inspection next year as well. We are also conducting unannounced inspections. This is something that was part of the enhanced inspection process. In addition to those annual inspections, unannounced inspections are in addition to those inspections. Reasons for unannounced inspections can include follow-up on items of noncompliance, issues of concerns that have been identified through various sources, following up on compliance drift. Sometimes a facility is having issues that if they don't correct those issues, they could lead to non-compliance in the future. Unannounced inspections will focus on those as well. And also physical plant and conditions of confinement are also sometimes included in unannounced inspections. 2023 was the first year that we began doing those unannounced inspections. Reporting to the BSCC board, there's always been a suitability process for the juvenile detention facilities that included submission of CAP and verification of corrective action with items of noncompliance. And with this enhanced inspection process, we added that same component to the adult detention facility inspections, where we're actively requesting corrective action plans from adult agencies, from sheriff's departments and police departments, and also actively following up on corrective action. Where there's significant items of concern, BSCC staff can seek approval from you all, from the board, to request that sheriff or chief probation officer or chief of police come before the board and talk about those items of noncompliance. And of course, all of our reports are posted, and you have seen us provide an update at every board meeting related to the current items of noncompliance. So again, the enhanced inspection process was about getting out into the facilities more frequently to conduct inspections, do follow-up, unannounced inspections, transparency and accountability. And those processes have all been added to our inspection process, and we've been doing those since 2023. Oh, and also ability for technical assistance. Again, just having the ability to go out to facilities either on an as-needed basis or again to follow up on items of noncompliance. That is also a part of our enhanced inspection process. So I know that some of you have been through inspections, probably some more recently than others. Wanted to give a quick overview. That's where I'm using the microphone. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. So a quick overview of what the inspection process looks like from start to finish. We do, and again, this is for every local detention facility inspection, 450 plus 133 facilities. First, we conduct a pre-inspection briefing. This happens before the inspection. It's an opportunity to make sure that the facility understands the material that we're going to be asking for in the facility inspection. It's helpful, especially during a comprehensive inspection, to have access to the documents and records that we'll need. So we hold a pre-inspection briefing before we conduct the actual inspection. Policy and procedure review will happen before we go on site. You've seen policy and procedure manuals. They're pretty lengthy and detailed. So what the field representatives will do is review policy and procedure and do a pass-through to see if policy and procedure meets Title 15 before they go to the facility. And they can generate any questions that they have for the administration when they get to the facility. The on-site inspection, this is taking what we've reviewed with policy and procedure and making sure that policy and actual practice are aligned. We're looking for evidence that the agency is compliant with Title 15, not just that their policy passes the test. So what we do when we're on site is we review documents. We do ask for samples, and we will also ask for agencies to pull samples, on site as well. So we get a combination of some data that is pulled before, and we're also going to ask for data to be provided to us while we're there. We spend a lot of time walking through the facility. We interview people that are housed in those facilities, both the young people and the adults. That's a really important way to get information about compliance with regulations. We also interview staff, observe physical plant conditions while we're walking around, and then we have the opportunity to look at live data. Not everybody does safety checks with a piece of paper and a pen anymore, but those types of things that are available at officer stations, we will look through. It's a really good way to get a snapshot of what's happening in the facility at that time. So the on-site inspection takes the longest, obviously, and again, it's making sure that we can see that Title 15, that the agency is, or unfortunately isn't, in compliance with Title 15 and Title 24, that no changes have been made to their physical plant that affects their compliance with physical plant regulations. And then the exit briefing. This is a really important part of our inspection process, because if there are items of non-compliance, that's when we are able to provide the facility administrator, the sheriff, the chief probation officer, or the chief of police with notice of non-compliance. That document is called the IIR, the initial inspection report. And that exit briefing, again, is where we provide the initial inspection report and we notice the agency if there are, in fact, items of non-compliance, and we can start the clock for receiving a corrective action plan and ultimately being able to verify that corrective action in a certain amount of time. And then, of course, there's follow-up. We often conduct on-site inspections, certainly if there are items of non-compliance to verify. We review documents, again, to make sure that items become in compliance or to review continued compliance. If there's technical assistance, if an item came up while we were on inspection and the agency needed us to come back at another time, we'll do that follow-up as well. Typically, it's on site. That's what our goal is, to be able to have our team members there to interact with the facility staff. But sometimes it's the magic of email and communication. So that, in a nutshell, in a police department, it might take several hours to do an inspection. But again, we have the time before that spent on policy and procedure review. In larger facilities, it can take several weeks to complete an inspection. So a summary of what the BSCC does: we do inspect for compliance with Titles 15 and 24. We do assess suitability for juvenile detention facilities. We adopt and revise regulations, and we conduct plan review. And the distinction between what we do and what we don't do is we don't develop agency policy and procedure. Title 15 is the framework for the agency to develop those policies, the policies, procedures, and actual practices that Title 15 require. We don't develop them for agencies. Really, really, really important distinction that I repeat a lot. We can't compel compliance in adult detention facilities. Different story with suitability in juvenile detention facilities, but in adult detention facilities, we cannot compel compliance. We cannot sue agencies, we cannot close facilities, and we don't issue sanctions. We don't conduct investigations, again, related to Title 15 and Title 24. We don't investigate complaints. We get a lot of complaint letters, sometimes from family members, sometimes from people that are housed in local detention facilities. We do our best to respond to those with what we can do. If it's a Title 15 issue, the inspector responsible for that agency will work through the issue with the facility administrator and also respond to that person. And we also try to let people know who they can reach out to if they have a complaint about conditions in detention facilities that don't relate to BSCC responsibilities. We don't inspect outside of Title 15 and Title 24. There are many, many laws, many other regulations that apply in local detention facilities. We stay within the boundaries of Title 15. We cannot call an agency out of compliance for something that's not in Title 15 or 24. And we don't enforce consent decrees. If an agency has a consent decree, a stipulated judgment, some other sort of settlement, they are responsible for making sure they meet the terms of those settlements and consent decrees. Sometimes they align with Title 15 and there'll be some crossover, but a lot of times they don't. And that's simply not our responsibility as the BSCC to enforce those or inspect for those. And finally, some additional oversight. And this is helpful to share too, because sometimes there are questions about, well, who does this? Who does that in a local detention facility? And there's a lot of other areas of oversight in these facilities. So fire and life safety, the state fire marshal or the local fire authority is required to do a biennial inspection and do a fire clearance of every local detention facility. They are required to send those to the BSCC. We don't always get them, but we do ask. We ask for copies. And an agency can be found non-compliant with Title 15 if they don't have fire clearance. Public health, medical, mental health, nutrition, environmental health inspections, the grand jury, Juvenile Justice Commission, those inspections happen each year. Juvenile Justice Commission doesn't necessarily inspect a county jail, but they will inspect a police department or sheriff station lockup. We send our inspection reports to those three entities, to the health department, to the grand jury, and to the Juvenile Justice Commission. They are also required to send their reports to us, I think with the exception of the grand jury. So there is distinction between what those entities inspect and what the BSCC inspects, but those reports can often inform one another. But we do try to stay in our own lanes with those and not inspect something that another agency is inspecting, and vice versa with those outside entities. State auditor, attorney general, criminal investigations are done by the district attorney, Disability Rights California, federal courts. These are all organizations that may be able to compel an agency to action. Those entities can do inspections, conduct investigations. I'm sure you're all familiar with the operations of those oversight bodies, and also accreditation organizations. If an agency chooses, they can choose to meet the standards of an accreditation organization, like the National Commission on Correctional Health Care is a popular one. That is a summary of our responsibilities, the facilities, the types of inspections. I'm going to hand it over to Katie to talk about Senate Bill 519, and then I think if there's questions from members, we can do that. So, Katie.
Thank you, Allison. If you wouldn't mind just doing the slides for me. This is a very high level overview, basically a planning update on Senate Bill 519, which we spoke about briefly at the September board meeting. So I just have a couple of slides. Next slide, please, Allie. So the governor signed SB 519. The bill specifically takes effect on July 1st of 2024. So I'm going to tell you, repeat again what the main components of these new requirements are for the Director of In-Custody Death Review, and let you know that our board will have many more conversations in the new year. When a new bill passes that requires a state agency like ours to establish a new function or set of services, there is a planning process that we engage in to make a request for the staffing resources and the funding resources. We've done that, but that is held confidential until the governor determines and the Department of Finance determine exactly what they want to put in the governor's budget in January. So there's much more to come in the new year. So highlights from SB 519, it creates the position here within the BSCC at the staff level of a director of in-custody death review. Like the members of this board, well, most of the members of this board are appointed by the governor. All of you are appointed by some entity. So this director position is governor appointed and subject to confirmation in the state Senate. At the highest level, the responsibility of the director, and with assistance from the staff that we anticipate getting next year, will be reviewing investigations of any in custody death incident, which is defined. We're going to have an item on our agenda later today connected to the regulation. I'm starting to slip over into my next slide. So just keeping it on what's in the bill. The director and that office will be responsible for reviewing investigations of any death incident. So in essence, we will be receiving the report from the county detention facility about the in-custody death incident and reviewing those investigations. The director will then be responsible for making recommendations to the sheriff or the facility administrator about the incidents, and that might include changes to policies, procedures, and practices, facility upgrades, staffing considerations, the delivery of medical and behavioral health services, and operational and capital funding requirements. So that I'm specifically reading from the bill right now. So that's the most important thing to go off of at this point. After that investigation is completed, we will provide recommendations to the county, and within 90 days of receipt, the sheriff or facility administrator will identify those recommendations that will be implemented, will provide a timeline for implementation, and discuss the anticipated cost of implementing. They will likewise identify if there are any recommendations coming from the Director of In-Custody Death Review that cannot or will not be implemented. They need to indicate and provide an explanation as to why that won't happen. And our board may call upon the sheriff or facility administrator to respond to discuss the recommendations once they are received. All of the recommendations and reports out of this office will be made public and available on our website. And so I think really that is about as much detail as we have. Next slide, please. As I started to note, we do have later on our agenda today a proposed amendment to the existing regulation on the death in custody regulation, and that simply spells out in a bit more detail what kind of reporting expectations we will have for counties when a death incident occurs, so that our office can fulfill this new function. I mentioned we've submitted what's called a budget change proposal, BCP for short, for the staffing resources, and that will be reviewed and vetted and discussed through the budget process next year, again with the start date of July 1. And we will have much more opportunity for planning and further board conversation next year. So Chair Penner, that concludes my overview, and we'd like to see if the board has comments or questions for any of this presentation.
First, thank you both so much. Those were really helpful presentations, especially Allison. I appreciated yours. When was the last time that number of 15 inspectors for 583 facilities revisited? And is it time to revisit that again?
That's a great question. So it was in the 2021 budget, I believe. We did get we got 14 staff total, and we added, I believe it was 7. Sometimes my math isn't good. 7 inspectors to our roster. We do have, I believe, 2 vacancies right now. So it was revisited after that budget year in 2021. That was the last time.
You're very discreet, Allison. It's a huge
Yeah.
lift. for a very small number of staff. We do have 2 vacancies.
Correct.
And we're pedaling as fast as we can to fill them.
Yes.
I guess the second part of my question is when those 2 vacancies are filled, is that sufficient to do what you need to do? Seems like a tremendous amount of work for a small number of people.
It is a lot of work.
There is, if I'll just jump in, Allison, there is a
Sure.
staffing request, Judge Guard, that will be part of the budget change proposal to fulfill the duties of the Director of In-Custody Death Review. So in order to do that new function, we are asking for new staff. And I think this board may indeed want to have further conversation about the staffing needs. I think that our FSO team does an absolutely amazing job. And it is a huge amount of work. So both things are true.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I have a couple questions. Thank you, both of you, as always. So one of the questions is the inspection process that you laid out. Is that the same for unannounced inspections, or does that change
That's
for unannounced?
a great question. So unannounced inspections, obviously, we're not doing a pre-inspection briefing. We typically don't have a chance to review, if they've updated their policy. Policy and procedures are available online, so we do have access to some of those. Or if we've, recently reviewed, we can go back and review. What's the same is that whatever the focus is, say we're looking at safety checks during an unannounced inspection, we'll have the same process. We'll walk through the facility. We'll ask for them to pull a sampling of documentation. We'll look at live documentation. We'll talk with staff. We'll talk with people housed in the facility. That portion will be the same. And then the exit briefing would be the same as well. If there's items of non-compliance, we'll issue that notice, the IIR at the exit briefing, and then do follow-up the same. So really the only difference is that we don't provide any notice or do any prep with the agency beforehand. We just show up.
Okay, great. And then I have 2 more questions. The complaints from the families that the BSCC is not able to answer, it's not in our scope. Where do you usually send those complaints? Like, I saw the page that you had, the additional oversight page, but do you guys know just offhand where's the majority of the referrals to? The attorney?
Well, it really depends. We do try to, as best as we can, figure out what they're trying to ask us. Sometimes, it takes a little bit of back and forth to understand what the question or the concern actually is. We will reach out to the facility administrator and say, hey, we've gotten this letter from this person. This is their concern. They may or may not have worked with that individual or that family, but it's just a prompt. We can't necessarily, compel an agency to do anything.
Mhm.
Every time that we've reached out to an agency and said we've had a question or a complaint from a family member or a person housed, they do follow up. They usually loop back with us and say, we talked to so-and-so and this is the outcome. So we have a little, record of it. We don't reach out to their attorneys or we just don't have the ability to do much more, but we would recommend, oh, hey, this sounds like an issue with your case or maybe your charges or your healthcare. Reach out to these people, reach out to your attorney or, medical staff in the facility. We just try to direct people to the right place, but we don't always know what that is.
Right.
Allison, would this be a decent time to interject that OYCR has an
Oh, that's a-
ombudsman, and we
Yes.
coordinate with them, and
Really good
I think we've
point.
had some conversations, and there's a planned exchange
Mhm.
on what matters may stay in
Right.
their agency or cross over to ours. And so it was, it's a great question because it was a need, and I think it has been filled with the advent of the ombudsman.
Yeah, thank
And-
you, Linda.
And then a few years ago, like right at the beginning of COVID, we went and did some inspections. That was fun. So is there opportunity for board members to participate in inspections at this point?
I think we should absolutely. It's difficult to do an inspection with people, but we can certainly figure out what that looks like. because we've done it before, and I think it's important for members of the board to be able to see the processes that we go through. So happy to talk about that.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Anybody else? Questions or comments? Oh, there you are. Supervisor?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the report. For SB 519, could you just spend a minute talking about how you anticipate the oversight to work? And one of the things I'm interested in understanding is for facilities that already have an oversight board or where the district attorney is involved, how do you see this particular role connected to those other activities, if at all?
This is Katie speaking. Thank you, Supervisor Chavez. I would say that the definition of the role of the Director of In-Custody Death Review is fairly well targeted on reviewing the investigations that, and perhaps you'll see a little bit more closely when we get to the agenda item later today about the changes to our regulation. I would say, and I'm happy to ask our counsel if he has thoughts to add as well. But our focus will be on reviewing the investigations. In certain instances, the director may request permission from the board to do additional investigation. It doesn't seem to me that this contemplates much consultation with others, certainly with in the example of a death in custody, surely there may be activities going on by the district attorney's office, criminal charges, whatever there might be potentially going on. We would not be, I don't think, involved in that. Our focus is going to be on facility operations and making recommendations to the local sheriff and or detention facility about policies, procedures, and practice modifications that might avoid death in the future. Aaron, anything to add?
No, we're
Okay,
not.
thanks.
So just to thank you for that,
Sure.
Katie. Does that mean then I guess what I'm really trying to understand is like there in custody deaths there are already so many or potentially so many reviews that have occurred. Are you saying that you would be availed of all of that literature to make determinations as to whether or not there are recommendations that align with the basics around the physical infrastructure?
Not just the physical infrastructure, Supervisor, but also like the practice. I mean, just to
Like
provide.
anything that overlays with those other areas, the 15 and 24.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So we might
right.
be looking at things like a person was found, at 11:15 a.m. deceased. And wait a minute, a safety check hadn't been done for 75 minutes. That's an issue, obviously. So it would be very much focused on operational, practical things where we can say, all right, here are some recommendations. Where we can make those, we will.
So one of the reasons, colleagues, that I'm raising this is that, and I'm only deeply familiar with one department, but we now have an oversight to our jails that does an inspection also as part of it, these kinds of incidents. And to your point, it's an interesting point about just making sure that whatever goes forward, that you have access to all of that data that may be above and beyond just what the custody facility produces, but what the DA produces, what our oversight, just again at a local level or other oversight bodies, that seems like that would be really relevant. I don't know under what circumstances outside of something being the public realm, but I was more just curious as to whether or not you'd have the ability to avail yourself of all of that other research that was done by others.
I think it's a great topic for future discussion as we begin setting this up.
Thank you. And then just one other question, and Ms. Kumpion might have asked it. I had a little bit of a difficult time hearing the response, and that was related to the unannounced inspections. And what I was curious about is if in an unannounced environment, do you ever have trouble getting access unannounced because it's so infrequent that happens? I imagine you show up somewhere and you might have people saying, "Whoa, you're not allowed to be in here." How does that work?
So we haven't yet had an incident where an administrator has said that to us. We do have
great.
permission in statute. We also have a fantastic memo from our executive director, just again reaffirming the fact that statute,
says, "Let
allows
them
us
in."
to go in
Please,
there.
please.
Just
Okay.
talking with a team member this morning, sometimes we show up and people have other plans of their own, either something unplanned with them or their family, or they're not at the facility. But again, what we found is somebody has always made themselves available in those facilities to work those things out. I've never seen, and my team has never seen, some administrator say, nope, that's it, come back tomorrow. We don't want you here today. It's always been, all right, well, we'll get somebody in here and we'll figure it out. It's not been an issue.
And Supervisor, this is
Yeah.
Katie. I would only add that when the law changed, I think it was 3 years ago, we made sure that, all of the elected sheriffs, the probation chiefs, all of the facility
Got it.
managers were aware that this unannounced inspection authority was statutorily granted. And as Allison said, we have not had problems in the field.
And the,
Thank you. That's
my
very
final
helpful.
addition is they're not as rare as you think, Supervisor Chavez. I think we're routinely doing unannounced inspections.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So one quick question. There was a slide with regard to the BSCC responsibilities was entitled additional oversight. And I didn't see local juvenile court judges mentioned as an additional inspector or.
Fair point.
I thought of that too,
Yeah.
Chief. We should have put juvenile court
Yeah.
judges on that list.
Fair,
Yes.
fair
enough.
point.
And then my second question is related to SB 519. So the director's position, it indicates that authorized representatives of the director may also request records, request entry, has it been considered who those authorized representatives might be, or how that is restricted or limited? Could be members, I assume, of the BSCC.
That's what I anticipate. Authorized representatives of the director, to me, that's the staff supporting the BSCC staff, whether they be inspectors, perhaps our analyst staff requesting documents. So the authorized representatives would be our staff carrying out the work of the director. Right, Aaron? Just say yeah.
Well,
So that actually, that causes a follow-up question.
Yes.
My concern is that with the implementation of the director's office and the associated work, that it is going to draw upon the already stretched resources of the BSCC staff. And is that being considered, and how is that being
yeah, and I think
accommodated?
Katie referred to the BCP that we have in to staff that portion of the agency. So we won't be drawing from current resources.
That's right.
Because you
We're
make an excellent point. At least we hope not to be drawing from current resources.
Right,
And,
okay.
and it's fair to say that, 519 is emerging. And so if we seem as though we don't have all the answers, it's because we're really planning and proposing budget items as fast as we can, because it will be here very soon.
And just to add to that, Madam Chair, we're actually not permitted to share what we've asked for. It's a confidential budget planning process with the governor's office now. So we'll know in January. We might know a few weeks before, but we just do not have that information yet, and we're not able to share it just yet.
Anybody else from the board?
Is the position you're saying July 1st, will they be in the position July 1st? Or will they open up the position July 1st?
Well,
That'll be a governor's
Yeah, that's-
office decision. We certainly hope the person will be in place by July 1st.
Yeah.
I mean, they really need to be, but we don't know the exact timing yet.
Anybody? Okay. And to those online, remember, we're going to finish the information session following our closed session. And there's a bit of a new process for people to link into the public comment section. So we're holding instructions and that until after our closed session. And I
That was a
just-
great idea, Madam Chair,
was an
by the way.
excellent
It was
idea.
super great. Yeah.
Yeah, well, every once in a while. And thank you to both of you for your presentation. Super informative. I've heard all of this many, many times, and doing this for the board members is super helpful, looking at how we are resourced and how much work is being done is impressive and compliments to the FSO staff who are tireless. And then we asked a million questions on top of that internally, and then we come to these meetings and even more examination and questions occur. So it's a really big deal.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Really appreciate that and agree with all the praise to our amazing team.
Right. And so now it's my pleasure to kick everybody out of the room. Well, that's not really true. We are going to have IT staff begin the next session. Those of you online, I'm sure you've been instructed, but you will now close out of this meeting and log on again to the closed session. Any other instructions for closed session that?
I would just note for the members of the public, this is Katie Howard speaking. This is really only a guess, probably around 45 minutes of discussion. We think there will be words posted on the screen of our public session that we are in closed session, and there will be at least a 5-minute transition period. But I would just say, keep an eye on the public meeting Zoom room, and maybe in 45 or 50 minutes or so, we'll be back in the public meeting. Thank you so much.
Great. And then those of you online, we'll give a 5-minute period right now for you to log off and log back on. 5 minutes really means 5 minutes. So.
And for members of the board's interest, Judge Guard is going to recuse from the closed session. Everyone else plans to stay, is that right? Super.
Great. And final thing, because I can't stop myself. I had inquired of Sheriff Groudon where he was, and he was on his way here. He had something call him back.
Oh, shoot.
So he turned around and went back. So he made half of the drive and was able to make it again. So we excused him and thank him for trying.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Welcome back. Thanks to all of us in our virtual audience and in the room for giving us time to take care of closed session. We're coming back now to complete the information items on our agenda. But prior to that, we have a new procedure for public comment. We hope it's new, better, improved, and fabulous. And I'm going to have Adam give the instructions. Follow along closely. We hope it helps us not miss anybody in public comment. That's our ultimate goal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. We are meeting both in person and virtually, and we will support public participation during this meeting through the Zoom webinar platform. Board members, for those participating remotely, if you wish to make a comment, please use the raised hand feature on Zoom or physically raise your hand so we could see you. Members in the room, please remember to state your name before making a comment so that those participating remotely may know who is speaking. Regarding voting, all agenda items that require a vote will require a roll call vote at the end of each agenda item. Board members in the room, please remember to turn off your microphones when you are not speaking, and please remember to speak into your microphones so that all on Zoom may hear you. Members of the public, for this portion, I'd like to hand it over to Executive Director Howard to describe some process changes we are making.
Thank you, Adam, and good morning again. Thank you, board members, for being here. Adam and I wanted to start out with some information for the public here in the room, as well as our board members. Last month, Adam and I met with some of our stakeholders, and they informed us at our last board meeting in September, there were members of the public who had requested the opportunity to make a public comment at our meeting, but their names were not added to the queue and they were not called on. And we apologize to anyone who had wanted to make a comment but was missed. So we have tried to spend some time with our fabulous IT team and internally to address these concerns. And our goal, as Chair Penner stated, is to improve our process and ensure that all public comments are heard. So here's the issue, particularly for people who are participating online. When people are on the Zoom webinar platform, they can't see the list of participant names. So if they put their hand up on Zoom, they aren't able to affirm that their name has been added to the queue to make a public comment. So we have a new, what Adam is sharing on the screen right now is the new process that we are piloting today and really asking for everyone's patience and understanding and hoping we don't have too many bugs as we work through this. But this is a live example. So if I were making a public comment, this would be the experience. We will switch to this being the screen that appears on the shared screen. And on balance, even though we understand that people might want to be able to be seeing the other video tiles, the importance during public comment is that the people who are in line know when it's their turn, and we can have the assistance of the timer on screen to help the public speaker manage their time. We also received the input that in prior meetings, sometimes the microphone has just been switched off when 2 minutes comes up, and someone might be in the middle of talking about something difficult. So we're going to do that differently as well. And when the timer runs, Adam will jump in with his voice and say, "Your time is up. Please complete your thought." So we're not going to be cutting people off abruptly when the 2-minute timer runs. So Adam will be managing this list. I'm not sure for the people in the room. I can't read it from here, but that's because I'm old and nearsighted. But you should be able to see your name and know that if you have requested to make a public comment, you might be able to see, okay, I'm number 2 on the list. And then Adam will be calling out the names as he usually does and managing the list in real time so that you can see it on the screen. Again, it's our hope that these changes support public comment in a more transparent way. And we are doing everything we can to ensure that all who want the opportunity to speak at the board meeting has the chance to do so. And I'll turn it back. Oh, how's that for timing? Okay.
Katie, please finish your thought.
Thank you.
Well, that's going to take some time.
Thank you, Adam. And back to you.
Thank
That was
you.
perfect.
Back to the members of the public. We will give the members of the public the opportunity to comment after the presentation of each agenda item and prior to the board voting on the item. You will have, again, 2 minutes. After your 2 minutes have ended, I will verbally let you know, and you may watch the screen where we will display the 2-minute timer. We encourage anyone wishing to make a public comment to raise their hand at the start of each agenda item being discussed. Members of the public will not have the ability to unmute yourself during the discussion until the chair opens it up for public comment. You must raise your hand or on Zoom or send a request through public comment at bscc.ca.gov. This is also available on our website. If you've sent in a request through the public comment email box, I will call on the email address or identifier you provided in your email. If you are calling by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand, dial *6 to unmute yourself. I will call on those who have raised their hands and those who have emailed your request to speak. And I will ask you to unmute yourself. I will notify you when the 2-minute timer sounds and ask you to wrap up your thought. As a reminder, the 2-minute timer will be visible on the screen, so please try to keep track of your time. When the time is up, please wrap up so that we have the opportunity to hear from everyone who wants to make a comment. Also, if your comment aligns with other speakers, please feel free to associate your comment with prior speakers. Thank you for your patience and understanding as we work to ensure all speakers can be heard. Agenda item 7 is the opportunity for any member of the public to make a comment on any agenda items. We will call the members on Zoom first, and then the members here in Sacramento. Public participants in the room, please complete a public comment card by the door and provide it to me during the meeting. As a reminder, again, you may follow along and view the list of those in public comments queue by visiting on the screen share. As always, we thank you for your patience. Madam Chair, that concludes my instructions.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for all your hard work on that. Renee. Yes.
What if someone wants to speak, thinks that they contacted you correctly, but don't see themselves on the list? What do they do?
that, we will ask,
They should raise their hands again on Zoom,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
if we've, so when the agenda item starts, they should raise their hand on Zoom. If they don't see their name or name or identifier, I mean, sometimes it might say like 916, whatever, that's totally fine, just as long as they know that's me. And if they don't see their name added, they should raise their hand again on Zoom. Mhm.
and also if you're calling my phone just for anonymity, we won't put the full number, just the first couple digits.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to return to the portion of the agenda citing information items. I am going to forego the chair's report. They've heard plenty from me today and move to hear from our executive director.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Good morning again. Members of the board, I'm Katie Howard, the Executive Director, and welcome to all who are here on Zoom and in the room with us. I wanted to start with an introduction on our management team. You'll be hearing from him in a little while. Greg Hossman is our Acting Deputy Director of the Standards and Training for Corrections Division, also known as STC. Greg? Greg joined the BSCC in the STC division in 2019 as a field representative. And prior to that, Greg had over 18 years of experience in correctional law enforcement as a captain and most recently as a jail commander in the Lake County Sheriff's Office. He led training and internal affairs investigations. It's been wonderful working with Greg in his acting DD role, and I want to thank him for being here today to provide the update on the annual compliance review for STC. Next item for me is to let the board know that we released the annual Community Corrections Partnership Survey out to all of the county probation departments. And this is an annual survey that provides information to the BSCC on each county's work toward implementation of the Public Safety Realignment Act. The survey responses and updated annual plans will be submitted this year through our submittable online portal. Just FYI, we're using new technology, and those reports will all be made available on our website. Importantly, I also wanted to provide a report out from a meeting that was held on November 2nd on Zoom. Many will recall that at the September board meeting in Palm Springs, we talked about a letter that we had received from grantees in the field who had received the adult reentry grant, and there were numerous concerns raised about grant administration in that letter. I want to thank Chair Penner and also board members Kumpion and Zaragoza for participating on that Zoom call. The discussion that night was really, really important for us to hear. We heard a lot of frustrations from grantees about some of the procedural and administrative processes. And I am confident that we are making positive changes to address the concerns that were raised in the general topic areas of invoices taking too long to be turned around, as well as requests for budget modifications, sometimes taking a long time for responses. As you can all imagine, in administering a complex grant program, there are a lot of requirements that go in, but we honestly did feel that some of those complaints were legitimate and that we needed to take a hard look at our internal processes and procedures and see what improvements we could make to ensure that there was more timely processing of invoices and budget modifications, and in some cases, the communication out to our grantees. The ARG program is large and complex, and we have made some very specific changes internally that, again, I'm confident, I hope are already being felt differently in the field by grantees, getting more timely responses. We've hired new staff, and we've internally reassigned field representatives to carry that workload in ARG. We've had an outside consultant who's a retired annuitant come in and make some recommendations on a reorganization of the staffing of that grant. And we've had numerous process improvements where we're really trying to shorten the time internally. This is a little bit of on the admin side and technically, but really shortening our turnaround for processing invoices. In addition, and this was certainly a part of the conversation on November 2nd, individual grantees, of course, have their individual questions and concerns, and we urged grantees to follow up and request one-on-one consultations with our team. And Deputy Director Colleen Curtin has already set up numerous follow-on conversations to address the particular questions that grantees may have. So again, I hope we'll continue to see improvements in our efficiency in grants administration. And I also want to add a comment for the specific benefit of our staff. I know that these comments are hard to hear, and sometimes our grant team feels like we're not acknowledging of all the hard work that they do. We absolutely are, and it's just a tremendous workload that they have had. And so to the extent that bringing more staff people into the office to work on those grants, that's going to be of benefit as well. I would like to ask Chair Penner or Board Member Kumpian or Zaragoza if you'd like to add any thoughts or reflections on the November 2nd meeting.
Annalise, would you like to add anything? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
There you
Oh,
go.
great.
I just want to thank everyone again who was able to join us and provide their input. And, what I expressed at the end of that meeting was that I really wanted to, not just finish that meeting and never hear from folks again. Right. And so I still feel that way. I encourage us to maybe in a couple of months invite folks to come on in again to reconvene and talk about, hopefully positive changes that they've observed in light of some of these steps that we have taken to improve turnaround and communication and just the process generally. I would still like to see that. I believe that, folks that came to that meeting took the time to put their thoughts together, to present some solutions to us. And we didn't really have an opportunity to go through those items and have a discussion about them. And so I invite folks today in public comment to maybe highlight some of those if they feel that it would be beneficial to have a discussion on particular items. But generally, I appreciate that we allowed that space. I think it's important, and I think it is something that we should do routinely. Thank you.
Thank you. Norma?
I just want to echo what Angeles said and say just thank you to the community and thank you for using your voice and for supporting people in our community with these grants and with the work that you do. It's some of the grants, I mean, I know from personal experience, they get a little bit complicated. And so I'm really excited to hear about the new staff and some of the workshops that the BSCC will hold to support people in the community that are leading these grants and leading the folks to have these services. So thank you all for using your voice, and thank you BSCC for holding that space for people to be heard.
Thank you. And I would echo those remarks and continue to remark about all the good work that is going on out there on these grants. And I think it is particularly meaningful if Colleen can meet one-on-one, because each grant is different. Each barrier feels different. And with those kinds of meetings, I think we make some really meaningful progress. And I think I'll just leave it at that.
Madam Chair, that concludes my report. Happy to take any questions that you may have.
Well, this is unheard of that it is that fast. Okay, moving on now to our legal update. Council?
Just very briefly, Madam Chair, I wanted to highlight and point the board to the fact on our agenda item that agenda item J has been stricken. We've been having ongoing discussions and conversations about how best to roll out the 209 suitability process and the corrective action plan process. We had a draft framework at the last board meeting that we pulled from the agenda for some additional conversations. We had worked to come up with a plan that we had thought we were going to have the board adopt today, but in reviewing that and before posting that agenda, we realized it needed some more work. So our plan is to bring that 209 process back again to the board in February, and hopefully we can formally adopt it then. And then, as always, just as part of the legal update, I wanted to highlight the grants that we are looking to put out, both in the form of RFP. We're not making any awards. Well, that's not true. We're doing some awards today in terms of ask the board members to, again, as always, look at the agenda items C, D, E, and F, and evaluate whether or not the agency you work for might want to participate in those grant programs, and recuse yourself from those items when we get there. I want to highlight agenda item C, even though it's on consent. I believe Supervisor Chavez will want to recuse herself from that item. And then, to the extent anyone is interested in participating in the MMIP program, the Medication Assisted Treatment Grant Program, or the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Grant Program, Sheriff Dykes, the F is a in custody drug treatment program. Those are federal dollars that go to that. And then also, I know San Bernardino has many tribes that are in your jurisdiction that may want to participate and work with your agency that you may want to consider recusing on item D.
Thank you. Adam, legal wrap up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will give a brief wrap up of the 2023 legislative session and the major bills that directly impact the BSCC. The governor signed AB 268 by Assembly Member Dr. Weber to add 2 additional board members, a licensed health and mental health or behavioral health care provider by July 1st, 2024, and appointed by the governor. The bill also requires changes to Title 15 safety checks and training regulations for our standards and training for corrections division. The BSCC has adopted regulations for safety checks in the last round of regulation revisions. Our standards and training for corrections division is currently planning to modify regulations to incorporate the mandated 4 hours of annual mental and behavioral health training for adult correctional officers as required in the bill. Staff are also developing regulations to ensure compliance with the bill regarding CPR training of officers. The SCC division will have more detailed information in the new year. Also signed by the governor are SB 519 by then Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins, as mentioned by Director Howard, will establish a governor-appointed Director of In-Custody Review and other duties for investigation and implementation of BSCC's recommendations. In addition, the governor signed 2 bills that may impact the California Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant, or the CALVIP grant, AB 28 by Assembly Member Gabriel and AB 762 by Assembly Member Wicks. Both bills will add more funding to the current CALVIP program. The AB 762 would expand the grant to include tribal governments. The bill would also allow for advance payments to grantees. With the expansion of the CALVIP grant, the BSCC would increase the number of grants. All bills directly impacting the BSCC are in your reading materials under tab 4. The legislature will return to session in January, and I will bring you any new bills that may impact the board. Madam Chair, that concludes my legislative wrap up. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. That also completes the information items on this agenda. And I would now ask the board if they have any questions or comments on any of the information items. Yes.
Madam Chair, I would just like to note I will recuse myself on items D and F.
Thank you. Yes. Mic on.
I'm going to recuse myself on items E and F also.
Thank you.
Sheriff Dykes, I'm sorry, we didn't hear your letters. Which items?
D is in David and F is in Frank.
Thank you.
And I would like to recuse, I'm sorry, I can't tell if I'm interrupting because I'm having
You're
a little,
not.
Okay, great. I'd like to recuse on item C and E and F.
Thank you. Seeing no further comment from the board, I would first like to express my gratitude for members of the public waiting for 45 minutes between information items and open the public comment on information items.
Okay, let's give it a minute to share the public comment queue. All right, so we have three in for information items. And first, I'm going to call Yusuf Miller. Yusuf, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. This is Yusuf Miller, the North County Equity and Justice Coalition of San Diego County, the Saving Lives in Custody campaign. And first off, I want to thank you for, it looks like amazing changes to the public comment session. And now I'll continue with my topic. The Director of In Custody Deaths and the range of that job, and also the in custody, the inspections from the BSCC. We need to make sure that we look in a broader sense at in custody deaths. For example, there are people who are sent to the hospital for compassionate release. And those are maybe not in custody deaths, but maybe what happened to them was in custody related. For example, in San Diego County, a couple days ago, our 12th death, a man, he fell in the jail. He's 71 years old. He fell. Then he went to the hospital. Later, he died from a heart attack. Now, we need to really be inspective and see if those two things are related. Was the fall related to an ADA incompliance in the jails? Was the heart attack only subsequent to this fall in the trauma to a 71-year-old? 71-year-old. So we need to look at this, see if these deaths, which are going to be classified as natural death because of heart attack, was not brought on and instigated by, for example, in this case, a fall in the jail. Now, I'm not saying that the fall was related to ADA incompliance. I want to know if the fall was related to ADA incompliance, and I'm working on that locally. But I want to give you a heads up on how to look at all of the cases that happen to people who are incarcerated, because when you just have in custody death and you have natural causes, we need to look deeper into that natural cause, whether it was due to neglect or something of that nature. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have MJ Hart. And I can't seem to find you on our queue. Can you please raise your hand? Is it Meredith? Can you please raise your hand so I could find you? MJ Hart, are you available and you are able to talk? Unmute yourself. Okay, we'll move on.
Okay.
We'll move on to Nancy Juarez. Nancy? Go ahead. Nancy, you're
Yes, before my time starts, I just want to let you know that MJ messaged me and said that they had to hop off, but they'll be back on. So most likely by the time I finish my public comment, they'll be able to join.
Thank you.
No problem. So Nancy Juarez with the Center on Juvenile Criminal Justice. I want to speak on Senate Bill 519. We asked for an open and transparent appointment process for the Director of In-Custody Death Review, potentially through an open forum of candidates that community can ask questions to. At the moment, we want to uplift Dr. Kristen Ochoa as a potential candidate for this role. In addition, how can Senate Bill 519 be proactive? San Diego County has nearly 80 non-compliance issues on the agenda today. How would the Director of In-Custody Death be proactive and take preventative approaches to these non-compliance issues to prevent further tragedy? If we know better, we should do better. Not too long ago, San Diego Sheriff sat on the BSCC board while there was an active investigation into his facilities by the California State Auditor. And in fact, that investigation is what led to Senate Bill 519. I also have a question for Deputy Director Allison Ganter on facility inspections. And just to root it in an example, Stanislaus County is out of compliance with Section 1391 discipline, which states deprivation of the following is not permitted: medical services and counseling. So youth are being denied medical services and counseling as a part of Stanislaus's disciplinary procedures. The county has yet to turn in a corrective action plan in its day 57. They have 60 days to submit a corrective action plan. If they fail to submit one, BSCC may find the facility unsuitable for the confinement of youth. And I know that back in LA, when they turned in the corrective action plan on the last day possible, March 14th, and it was not accepted by the BSCC, we were left with a big question mark. So I just wanted to check in and ask, what does that mean for a county like Stanislaus that is at day 57 out of 60? Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Nancy. And we'll go back to MJ Hart. Please raise your hand. There you are. You are unmuted.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is MJ Hart. I am the Pathways to Higher Education Project Coordinator at the Youth Law Center, and I'm also a survivor of the juvenile and adult justice systems, as well as a survivor from the child welfare system. I'm not only speaking for myself today, but for my peers who tragically lost their lives after years of subjugation, torture, mental, sexual, physical, and emotional abuse by adults who were hired and paid to protect us. I spent almost a decade under the court's care. What I endured was not care. It was an abuse of power with little to no oversight to stop it from happening. Many times I had to urinate in my water cup because staff would refuse to let me use the bathroom. Today, I live with glass in my hand because the court's refusal to adhere to a medical doctor's treatment that I needed surgery to remove the glass. I spent weeks, months in solitary confinement, not because I was a danger to myself and others, but because I was a 12-year-old child with mental and emotional disabilities who found it hard to not talk while on silent, to not horseplay with other children, or sing myself to sleep while I grew into an adult locked in a cage. During my time in juvenile correctional facilities, I was not allowed to go to school, church, or program with others. I was deemed maximum security risk because I refused to be abused. Again, there was little to no oversight to stop any of this from happening. Today, I'm 33 years old and I suffer from chronic PTSD, anxiety, depression, and a multitude of challenges as a result of the horrors I endured as a ward of the court. The justification then was I was a monster, a super predator. But if that was true, then wouldn't I be doing something horrible with my life? No, right? But I'm not. Since then, our understanding of child development, brain science, and basic human rights has shifted to prioritizing care over punishment, and legislative changes have been made to reflect this evolution. You have all been granted the privilege to be responsible for making sure facilities and those who run them are being compliant with those legislative changes. It is very alarming that not only is this board taking a very unreasonable time in addressing non-compliance concerns, but children are dying, overdosing in the court's care. You are creating a director in custody deaths who must be a licensed medical practitioner. I have a few concerns. First is that this position will be filled by a retired law enforcement officer who is now practicing medicine. In both my personal and professional life, I've seen the detrimental impacts of appointing former law.
MJ, please finish your thought.
Oh, okay, thank you. I've seen the detrimental impacts of this, and I'm hoping that there will be some type of public forums to get weighing from the public and to make sure that this director has the best interests of children in the care. And second, also, is there going to be proactive processes to protect the children from death? Most of my peers committed suicide after leaving custody with a note detailing the horrors they endured at the hands of the staff. Lastly, will there be time constraints on the processes of investigation so that the survivors and their families can seek some type of legal remedies within the statute of limitations against those who caused their child harm and creator forbid death? I would like to just please for you all to remember.
Excuse me.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, James, you emailed the public comment email box. Would you like to talk? You can unmute yourself. James Martinez? If not,
Yes,
you're ready.
definitely. Thank you very much for that. My name is James Martinez. I'm a policy and programs assistant with MIPA. I am very deeply concerned about the in-custody deaths that continue to seem to be a continuing occurrence. What will it take for us to really come to some solutions that can really save the lives that continuously keep dying while in custody. What is happening and what is taking place really needs to be examined. There is a cause to everything that happens, and if what is happening is a result of a lack of care, as a lack of resources, as a lack of negligence that continuously keep happening, is very concerning. The time is now to really identify and address the variables that keep going into this. And I'm not here to point fingers, but I really want to encourage this board to do their due diligence, to come up with some solutions and come up with some necessary changes that need to happen. Change needs to happen. Californians are dying while incarcerated, and this is not okay. Someone really needs to take note of this and really address this in such a way where we can stop it. For us to continuously turn a blind eye to this clearly shows that we are all culpable, that we are all responsible to some extent, especially based on the fact that we are aware that this keeps happening. What will it take for us to really sit down and really examine what is happening? BSCC, y'all have a responsibility for the safety of those that are incarcerated, whether it's the conditions or whether what is occurring. But I implore you all to really do your due diligence to address this matter at hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And last commenter for information items is Adrina. Adrina, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hi, I wanted to make a comment in regards to in custody deaths, especially within the juvenile facility. And I just wanted to bring up to notice that, we had a probation oversight commission, and the mother of Brian Diaz attended this meeting, seeking answers about the death of her son while in the care of probation, and probation completely left their seats empty. They didn't even show up to the probation oversight commission meeting to address this mother who was reading the most heartbreaking letters and her kids' last moments. And it just showcases that the lack of care, lack of accountability. And this is what's representing our government. And, just as a citizen taxpayer who funds these programs and it comes out of our paychecks, it's hard to believe that this is our representation. This is what you guys have showing up. They don't even show up. So it showcased their lack of care. And I wasn't the only one who had mentioned and brought it up. Another person commented and quoted Winston Churchill, pay attention to what people do rather than what they say. And their lack of showing up to address this mother in the times like this, when it's, the accountability while they're in their care, it left me at a loss of words. And not sure if you guys were aware of it, but I just wanted to make that brief comment as far as towards, I hear people talking about in custody death, and it's just some tragedy, especially for a child. We're talking about kids here now, so it's just getting worse. And I would hope to see change. It is your guys' responsibility. Instead of pushing the meetings off and off and off and off again, we're going in a circle of insanity. We want results.
Adrina,
Thank you.
your 2 minutes is up. Please finish your thought.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I just wanted to leave that comment.
Thank you.
And we have one in the room, and I'm going to call up Avalon.
I'd like the opportunity to respond to what was discussed during both the information session, which is a different set of topics from the chair's report. So I'd like to request at least 4 minutes because that is two separate. There were multiple things discussed this morning, but I'd like the time, especially since there's only like 5 people who wanted to give comment this morning.
I think we'll hold it 2 minutes.
I can't hear.
Go ahead and proceed.
Okay, good morning, members of the board. My name is Avalon Edwards. I'm with Starting Over Inc. It's good to be here to speak with you in person. Regarding public comment on a day like today, we have about 5 people trying to give comment. Public commenters waited over an hour for the board's closed session to end. If we can be considerate of your time, you should be considerate of ours. I think it would have been appropriate for MJ to be able to fully finish their comment. I ask that this board at least attempt to treat public commenters like we're humans. To give some space to someone who's recounting decades of abuse and trauma in order to get your attention to these issues. I ask the same for myself today. I've worked with several members of the board and staff on many of the issues that were discussed this morning, and I'd like the opportunity to discuss them in full. In response to the information session this morning, I appreciate that Allison's overview provided context to newer board members about the inspections process. I would also like to provide some context to new members on how this body has historically not fulfilled its most basic statutory oversight obligations that have been well within its powers. This body did not begin conducting unannounced inspections until community members pushed for several months for this process, asking the obvious question, what is the point of an announced inspection where law enforcement agencies have the ability to prepare for the BSCC's inspections team? This body also failed to collect COVID-19 data for the first several months of the pandemic, claiming it is outside of the scope of responsibilities of the agency. It was not. I'd also like to address the claim that Chair Penner made that the OICR's ombudsperson somehow takes care of, quote unquote, the grievances filed by adults in custody. That is a youth-specific office and has nothing to do with addressing concerns of incarcerated adults. The context I'm trying to convey here is that this body has historically underrepresented its own powers of oversight. Community will be keeping this in mind as the board begins to implement SB 519 and prematurely claim how little power this position actually has. I'd like to ask the board, and I would like a response. A massive problem with sheriff and probation oversight now is that the BSCC claims inability to enforce compliance. I'm asking the board to step into its oversight powers and responsibilities and push itself to provide more meaningful oversight with the added responsibilities of in-custody death reviews. A question I would like a response to is, considering the board's responsibilities over the disbursement of state monies to local law enforcement agencies, will the board consider revoking or withholding funds from sheriff's departments who refuse to comply with recommendations made by the Director of In-Custody Death Review? Now, I'd like to respond to the chair's report, a separate set of issues.
If I may, I think you'll have an opportunity to respond at the open session at the end of the agenda. And my precautionary note on not allowing people 4 minutes versus 2 minutes is because I think we have to equally share the time. And if one individual's offered 4 minutes, then everybody should be offered the 4 minutes. So I'd ask you to hold your remarks for the end of the agenda. And in response to your question, can we hold jails fiscally responsible if they're out of compliance? I believe that's what I heard you ask. We as a state entity don't fund jails. The county funds their individual jails. That's the short answer. I don't believe we have that ability in our oversight process.
I'd like to at least address you, Katie. I mean, we've been in conversation about some of the grantee issues, and I would really like the opportunity to respond now, as this has been, you were just giving this overview to board members, and I am here. And you have much more to discuss today, and I would like to address it more immediately. I mean, this is a public comment forum, so I would like to.
Correct. And I'm offering you public comment at the end of the agenda, so you don't take 4 minutes versus what everybody else got, which was only 2 minutes. Do you see the equity there?
I also think other people should have gotten more than 2 minutes,
Okay.
which is what I said at the beginning.
Understood. That's understood.
There's a handful of people here to give comment who have waited. As I said earlier, you all were in closed door sessions for much longer than you said you would be. People have waited patiently. This is a public agency. But if that is the consensus, I will wait until general comment.
Thank you.
There are no more public comments, Madam
Thank
Chair.
you. Now we're going to the consent items on the agenda. That's item A, B, and C. I'd ask any members of the board if they'd like to pull one of those items, or any member of the public if they would like to pull those items. Seeing none. Anyone from the public? None? Yes,
I was just gonna ask that we separate the vote, so we take A and B in one motion and then agenda item C separately, because Supervisor Chavez is gonna recuse on
understood,
C.
understood.
I'll move item A and B.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Ms. Zaragoza,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for items A and B.
Okay, and now we will move to item C, and Supervisor Chavez is going to recuse herself. So if you would give us about 2 minutes, I think we'll be inviting you right back. Any other recusals? Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye. Did we have a motion in a second?
No, we did not.
Yeah, we need a
foresee.
motion in a second on that.
So moved.
Second.
Motion in a second. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez recused, Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Ms. Zaragoza,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item C.
Thank you. Moving now to action item discussions. Item D on the agenda, Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Grant, Cohort 2, Request for Proposals. Hello?
Hello. Ready?
Ready.
Okay, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Eddie Escobar, Field Representative with the Corrections Planning and Grant Programs Division, and I will be presenting agenda item D as recommended by the Executive Steering Committee. This agenda item requests board approval to release the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Cohort 2 Request for Proposal with the funds that remain unallocated from the first round of awards and the one-time augmentation from the 2023 state budget. In addition, this agenda item also requests board approval to fund a proposal submitted by the Trinidad Rancheria in response to the original RFP, which was inadvertently disqualified from funding. First, I will provide a brief history of the MMIP grant program. The grant program was established in the State Budget Act of 2022. This grant provides competitive funding to federally recognized tribes in California to support an array of activities such as outreach and awareness campaigns, mental health and substance use disorder treatment, family support services, community healing activities, human trafficking education, or to foster funded partnerships between tribes and their local law enforcement partners. In July 2022, the board approved the establishment of the Executive Steering Committee to be chaired by board member Norma Kupion, authorized staff to work with the chair to establish a diverse ESC, and authorize the ESC chair to oversee the grant development process. The first RFP made $11.4 million of funding available and was released in April of 2023. Only 4 tribes submitted applications in response to the first RFP. At the September board meeting, 3 of the 4 proposals were approved for $2.4 million in funding, leaving $8.9 million unallocated. Since that time, BSCC staff determined that the 4th proposal submitted by the Trinidad Rancheria was inadvertently disqualified and should have been included in the first round of awards. Today, we will be requesting board approval to award $436,000 to the Trinidad Rancheria. And with this 4th award, $8.52 million remains unallocated. The State Budget Act of 2023 included a one-time augmentation of $12 million. This means that $19.92 million is now available for a second round of grant funding. In an effort to expand outreach for the next cohort, over the last couple of months, BSCC representatives participated in several tribal events, not only to increase awareness for the MMIP grant, but also to receive input from the tribal community for the ESC to consider in the Cohort 2 RFP. In October, the MMIP ESC reconvened and agreed to several non-substantive revisions to the Cohort 2 RFP. You will find the Cohort 2 RFP in attachment D1. Some of these changes include the addition of language to highlight the flexibility in the types of activities grant funds can be used for, encourage collaboration among 2 or more tribes, and to encourage partnerships between tribes and their local law enforcement partners. Through our outreach efforts, we learned that one of the reasons so few proposals were submitted in response to the original RFP was the result of many tribes feeling that the application period was not long enough for planning or coordination among tribal partners. The ESC took this important detail into consideration and extended the cohort 2 application period from 2 months to 4. Also, in an effort to get funds out quickly to the tribes, the ESC agreed on a start date of July 12th, 2024, the day after the July board meeting. However, staff is now recommending a 2-week delay to start the grant on August 1st, 2024. This will align reporting periods with the first of the month and allow extra time to execute grant agreements. In conclusion, on behalf of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Grant Program, ESC, staff recommends that the board fund the proposal submitted by the Trinidad Rancheria in response to the original RFP for $436,000, approve an amendment to the RFP that moves the start date of the cohort 2 grant from July 12th to August 1st of 2024, and release the cohort 2 Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Grant Program RFP with approximately $19.92 million in total funding. I would like to thank board member Norma Cupion for serving as chair of the ESC and her commitment to the success of this program. Madam Chair, this concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Eddie. Any questions, comments from staff? Norma?
I just want to thank you, Eddie, and Mike and Colleen for all of your work towards this, and also for listening to the community members and coming up with the solution. And I learned so much from the community members and the outreach that was needed. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the tribes, and I look forward to seeing this come to fruition. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Eddie. I too really benefited from attending the California Tribal Business Alliance and listening to their concerns. And one, as you said, was needing a longer time to apply for the grant. We were able to honor that. I'm super excited that we're going to have more applicants this time. There's nothing more discouraging than leaving money on the table for such a worthy cause. So we're really excited. And Norma, my thanks to you for both doing outreach to get more applicants and also heading this committee. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was fun because they fed me, by the way.
They
The-
feed
the
you.
ch- They feed you. I
That
mean,
sounds
they
good.
weren't playing around. Yeah, it was great.
Good, good. Any questions or comment from the board on this item? Seeing none, any questions or comments from the public on this item?
I do not have any public comments for this.
Okay, may I have a motion in a second?
Actually, Madam Chair, someone just raised their hand.
Okay,
Let's screen share the timer. Okay, I have Yusuf Miller, and Yusuf, please unmute yourself and you'll have 2 minutes.
My name is Yusuf Miller with the North County Equity and Justice Coalition Saving Lives in Custody campaign, but this time I'm speaking on behalf of my other organization, Mosques Against Trafficking, and I would like to support the release of these funds to the MMIP as soon as possible. This work is really important, and it overlaps in many entities. For example, domestic abuse, human trafficking, child abuse. All of these kinds of things are intertwined, and the resources that are needed for drug addiction and all kinds of issues that our indigenous families are facing. So from the Mosque Against Trafficking support, I would like to ask for those funds to be released immediately to our indigenous companions who are doing this work. Thank you.
No more public comments.
thank you. Looking for a motion and a second from the board. A motion, second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dyke is recused, Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Ms. Zaragoza,
Yes.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item D.
Thank you. And thank you again, Eddie.
Thank you.
Moving on now to item E, Medical Assisted Treatment Grant, RFP, requesting approval. It does say Tim was going to be here, but I know he's unable to be here, so we really got the big wig forward today and
I don't know about that.
got
Thank you.
big guns out. Oh,
Oh,
thank
sure.
you. Look at us smoking on without him. And I see that Supervisor Chavez has left the building. So she's recused herself
She's
on this
recused
item.
herself as
Thank
well.
you. And I saw you counting, Council. Are you concerned of a quorum?
I'm just making sure,
Just doing
Madam
some
Chair.
counting.
I think we're okay.
All right, as long as we got the right digits, we're good to go. Yes, Colleen.
All right. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, Colleen Curtin, Deputy Director for the Corrections Planning and Grant Programs Division. I am presenting agenda item E, requesting approval to release a request for proposals for a grant that is new to the BSCC called the Medication Assisted Treatment, or MAT grant program. The MAT grant program was established in 2021 by Assembly Bill 653 as a competitive grant program to be administered by BSCC to become operative once funding is provided. The bill requires the board to award grants to counties with grant funding to be used for various purposes relating to the treatment of substance use disorders and the provision of medication-assisted treatment. In 2022, Assembly Bill 179 amended the Budget Act of 2022 to provide $10 million in funding for the MAT grant program. The MAT RFP and both Assembly bills are included in your materials as attachments E1, 2, and 3. At the November 14th, 2022 board meeting, staff had requested approval to convene an executive steering committee to guide the development of this RFP. And since then, the launch of the MAT grant program was delayed due to lack of ESC participation and prioritization of other grant programs. In order to expedite release to the field, staff developed the MAT RFP in-house, relying on guidance from subject matter experts. In lieu of an ESC, staff will request that a scoring panel be convened to read and rate the proposals submitted in response to this RFP. BSCC will make every effort to recruit a diverse group of subject matter experts with professional or lived experience to participate in this process. If necessary, internal staff may also be used to supplement the scoring panel. I will quickly highlight some of the key components of this grant. Eligible applicants are California counties. There is $10 million available. Successful applicants will be awarded funds to implement and deliver services for 3 years, with an additional 6 months for project evaluation. Individual county applicants may request a maximum of $1.25 million for the 3-year project. 2 or more counties may submit a collaborative proposal and request up to $2.5 million for the 3-year project. A county may not apply both individually and as part of a collaborative. Per the authorizing language, MAT grant funds may be used by recipient counties for 1 or more of the following 6 activities, and these are listed in your board report. Number 1 is substance use disorder counselors in county jails. Number 2, post-release medication. Number 3, service contracts between jails and treatment providers. Number 4, law enforcement and behavioral health mobile crisis teams. Number 5, MAT for persons under criminal justice supervision. And number 6, community-based MAT and substance use disorder treatment services. With board approval today, the RFP will be released on December 1st, 2023. We're releasing the RFP a couple weeks from today to iron out some technical issues with our web-based submittal portal. Proposals will be due back to the BSCC by February 16th, 2024. Funding recommendations will be presented to the board on April 18th, and the anticipated start date for the project will be May 1st, 2024. In conclusion, staff recommends the board take the following actions: approve and authorize release of the MAT grant program request for proposals, and allow staff to convene a scoring panel for the proposal rating process to include BSCC staff as necessary. And I'll mention that we will be recruiting individuals to serve on this scoring panel. Any assistance the board can provide in that effort is greatly appreciated. If you know of individuals who might be interested in serving, please direct them to our website or to contact me directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from board members? Adam, any members of the public wishing to make a comment on this item?
Yes, I have one member of the public. That would be Yusuf Miller. And Yusuf, please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, this is Yusef Miller, the North County Equity and Justice Coalition Saving Lives in Custody campaign. And with this rollout of this medical treatment program, we should implement a quality assurance program as well. I don't know if it's already in there, but I'm speaking up for it, that quality assurance in medication delivery. We have a lot of incidents where people are not receiving their medication either at all or on time, which exacerbates some of their medical conditions, mental health wise and medical health wise in the jails, which just makes the whole problem escalate and spiral out of control. So a QA program where the timing and the efficacy of medical treatment is being observed and has oversight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all for public comment.
Thank you. Looking for a motion and a second, please.
Madam Chair, I'll move for staff's recommendation.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Gard recused, and Ms. Chavez recused, Ms. Zaragoza,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item E.
Thank you. Moving on to item F, looking for recusals before, there you go, Sheriff. Anybody else? And Judge Guard, is she coming back in for this?
She's
item?
going to recuse on this
She's gonna
item as well.
recuse on this item also?
And Supervisor Chavez is recused as well.
Supervisor Chavez. All right, thank you. That's the RSAT. Oh, look who's here again. Colleen, thank you.
Still here. I will now present agenda item F, requesting approval to release a request for proposals for the next 3-year cohort of the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Grant Program, also known as RSAT. There have been no changes to the federal requirements for the RSAT program since the last RFP was issued. So staff is recommending the release of the RFP developed by the RSAT Executive Steering Committee in 2021, as chaired by Board Member Sheriff Dean Groudon. The RFP and ESC membership roster are included in your materials as attachments F1 and F2. For the proposal rating process, staff requests that a scoring panel be convened. Again, staff will make every effort to ensure that we recruit a diverse panel of subject matter experts. If necessary, internal staff may also be used to supplement the scoring panel membership. I will point out some of the key components of the RSAT program. For this next round of grants, there is a total of $7.5 million available. That is 3 years worth of federal funding. Eligibility to apply is restricted to counties that operate adult local detention facilities. Successful applicants will be awarded funds to implement and deliver services for 3 years, with an additional 6 months for completion of a final evaluation. Applicants can request a maximum of $1.5 million for the 3-year grant period. Please note that there was a typo in the original board report. I don't know if I believe you have the updated copy in front of you. The old board report said 500,000, but it is in fact 1.5 million. A 25% match is required. Currently funded RSAT grantees are eligible to apply as long as they plan to augment or expand current efforts. The intent of the RSAT program is to provide substance use disorder treatment for incarcerated persons, prepare individuals for their reintegration into the community by incorporating reentry activities into treatment programs, and to continue community-based aftercare services. Applicants may apply to fund in-custody treatment and services, aftercare services, or both. With board approval, the RFP will be released on December 1st, 2023. Proposals will be due back to BSCC by February 2nd, 2024. Funding recommendations will be presented to the board in April, and the anticipated project start date will be July 1, 2024. In conclusion, staff recommends the board take the following actions: approve and authorize release of the RSAT RFP, and allow staff to convene a scoring panel for the proposal rating process to include BSCC staff as necessary. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from a member on the board? Seeing none. Adam, any public comment?
Do not have any public comments for this item.
Thank you. Looking for a motion and a second. Please,
So moved.
please.
Moved. So moved.
Thank you.
Second. Oh, okay.
We have a lot of firsts. How about a second?
Oh, second.
Thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes, Ms. Chavez, and Ms. Guard recused. Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
and Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Zaragoza,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries for agenda item F.
Thank you. And do we have a moment to invite all our recusals back into the room? Here they come. Supervisor Chavez with us, okay. Now, Greg, you're gonna have to forgive me. Is this your first time to present in your new job?
Yes, Madam Chair, it is.
Well, we just want to heighten your anxiety and let you put that out there in the universe. For STC, Greg, please take the agenda item.
All right, good day, Madam Chair, members of the board. Gregory Hossman, Acting Deputy Director of STC, also known as Standards and Training for Corrections Division. Today, I'm presenting agenda item G, which is STC's annual compliance report and annual update. This is an information item only. The purpose of this brief session is to provide information regarding the STC and those agencies participating in the STC program. STC monitors two separate types of training for correction staff. First is the annual training, which is continuous training for officers that have been in their assignment for 1 or more years. This training ranges from 24 to 40 hours, depending on the job classification. Second is core training, which is the initial training for new officers and must be completed within 1 year of hire and ranges from 2 to 4 weeks for the intensive training. Before we dive into our compliance findings, these are some numbers that I would like to share with you, which is labeled G1 in your tabs. These numbers reflect this year's statistics, and with this presentation, I have pulled a couple of those tables. The following table gives a breakdown of the agencies that participate in the STC program, which is voluntary. There's 58 counties within California. However, San Francisco probation is broken between adult and juvenile. Napa County is noted as the DOC, and Sierra and Alpine County Sheriff's Office do not participate in the program as they do not operate a county jail. Additionally, we have 264 private providers that work with the STC to help provide training to agencies. The next table is a breakdown of staff by classification. For fiscal year 22-23, the 150 agencies reported a total of 31,084 officers on their annual training plan, which is often referred to as the ATP. And these are the staff that STC monitor each year for training standards. The following slide shows the total hours reported to STC for each job classification for a total of 1,288,293 training hours reported to STC. The compliance and process involves field reps meeting with training managers from each agencies where they review annual and core files. For agencies to achieve a finding of compliance, they must follow the regulations for the selections and trainings for all STC eligible personnel. Compliance expectation is 100% except for those staff who are off duty the entire training year or who met BSCC's criteria for mitigating circumstances. Mitigating, in other words, are circumstances that would allow a specific agency personnel to meet compliance without meeting the 100% standard. Those circumstances are as follows. First is an employee's significant or unanticipated leave at the end of the fiscal training year made it impractical to complete the required training. The second is an employee was absent from work for 6 or months more, 6 or more months within the fiscal training year. A personnel problem involving an employee, but the participating agency has taken positive steps to correct the problem. An innocent error, ergo record keeping error, clerical error, computer data error, etc. And finally, the number of staff or the number of hours lacking for full compliance is insignificant compared to the agency's total training obligation. And this occurred despite the agency's exercising due diligence in the management oversight and training program. Across the state in fiscal year 22-23, there were 56 staff who did not come into compliance with STC training requirements. Note, however, 31,084 individuals participated in the STC program. As such, the number of staff not meeting the full STC training requirement represents less than 1/4% of local corrections personnel statewide not being in compliance. Within the 150 participating agencies within our program, we had 136 agencies in compliance and 14 out of compliance. If you look into your attachments under G2 and 3, you will find the agencies that are in and out of compliance, along with the reason for non-compliance. Finally, above are a few of the items we oversee within STC. I would also like to provide an update on some important work we are currently doing related to the core course monitoring. In July 2020, STC released the new core curriculum, and there were significant changes in the standards. We have conducted ongoing core certifications and have found the core course curricula, including learning standards, to be generally in good shape. However, due to the COVID pandemic, we were only able to do limited in-person course monitoring until recently. We have ramped up efforts to conduct more course monitoring, and we will be offering technical and course feedback to ensure compliance with those agencies. And that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Greg, thank you so much for the report. And a little bit off topic is it's good to see that the work that the BSCC has done. And I'd just like to say thank you to the reps that we work with to provide the support we have to make sure that our staff get trained and whatever resources that we need to make sure that that happens is there. I just wanted to make a note, and when we look at detachment G1, when it talk on item number 2, where it says participating STC staff by category, and it talks about juvenile correctional officers from 2021-22 to the next year, 2022-23 budget years, and a loss of 141 net juvenile correctional officers across, I'm assuming this is across the state. And it just kind of highlights a trend that we've seen. And also you see to a degree with the probation officers, but I'll talk a little bit more about the JCO staff in particular, is that we've seen just a significant loss of new staff, either coming into the profession or the other part of it is the testing criteria and the state testing, the exam itself. When I look at item number 3, and it talks about JCOs who we've had those selection examinations that have taken place, over 1,000 more than the previous year, but we're actually losing more in the second, in that same budget year. The question, when was the last time we took a look at the state's test for JCO, just so that we could see what the competencies are, how often do we look at that, just so that we can make sure that what's being administered as a state exam is really still really measuring what kind of staff we have coming out of the colleges that are coming out in those folks who are interested. Because when I look at the different categories where I see adult correctional officers and all these other places where we see gains, we see significant reductions in JCOs coming into the field. And so just to answer that question first about the exam, the state exam, and when we had a chance to take a look at it.
Well, first off, I want to make it known that these numbers are for our exams that are taken. There are some agencies that host their own exams.
Sure.
So it's not fully inclusive to every exam throughout the state of California.
Okay.
It's just for our exams only. Now, as far as the last time it was reviewed, I wanted to say we did it right before the core compliance. We did a whole curriculum, went through it, because before we had 3 individual tests, one for adult correctional officers, one for juvenile correctional officers, one for probation. Now it is one combined test with different scoring requirements for each classification that we do. So as far as the next time we're doing it, it's actually on our agenda, as you can see in our division, to be looked at again as we're accumulating those numbers, because we're actually pulling those numbers right now, especially coming back from 2 years of being almost completely isolated. So right now we're just really getting those numbers coming back to us. And I'd be happy to bring that forward to you in a later date.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Anybody else? Adam, any members of the public wish to comment on this item?
At this time, I have no public comments for this item.
That includes in the room and on Zoom, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. This is an information item only, so we'll move now to item H. Opioids and local detention facilities survey. And there's Allison.
Thank you, Chair Penner. Give me one moment to get myself. Gotta love technology. Resituated. Good afternoon, Chair Penner and board members and members of the community and colleagues. Allison Ganter, Deputy Director with the Facility Standards and Operation and Research Divisions. And I'm here to talk about agenda item, I believe it's H, a survey in local detention facilities on the use of opioid antagonists. So during the last few meetings, there has been discussion and growing concerns about overdoses in both adult and juvenile local detention facilities. And as a result of these discussions, our fantastic team has developed a draft survey for your review and approval. I want to recognize Casey Warmoth and Stacy Riley and Jill Ferris for their really thoughtful work on this project. You all have a copy of the draft survey in your binders there. You've seen a copy of the survey, and with your approval, we'll begin collecting data on the availability and use of opioid antagonists in facilities beginning in January of 2024. I encourage you all to read over the overview that's provided. It's a really helpful explainer of the survey and why we're collecting these particular data. Opioid antagonists are products that can reverse an overdose. Common brand names are Narcan and naloxone. And I may go back and forth and use the term Narcan occasionally for ease of reporting. So we're going to use the deployment of these opioid antagonists as a proxy to attempt to identify how many overdoses happen in facilities. It really is not possible for the BSCC to identify each specific incident of overdose, what substance may have been used and what the outcome is in local detention facilities. For instance, it's not always possible to identify what substance a person may overdose on, and if unfortunately a person succumbs to an overdose and passes away, the toxicology reports can take months, and they also might end up being inconclusive. So this survey was developed out of, again, that attempt to get a handle on the number of overdoses that are happening in detention facilities. So the survey we'll distribute has 2 parts. First, do you have Narcan in your facilities, and who has access to and the ability to use that product? This will help us have a baseline for the availability of opioid antagonists out there in detention facilities. And we'll continue to request this information each quarter so we can update if facilities change availability or who can potentially use that product in their facility. And second, we're going to collect the number of uses of Narcan each quarter. We're going to attempt to keep it to the incident will be the person on which the product is deployed, even if it were multiple uses of one of these opioid antagonists. So we have numbers of individuals that have potentially overdosed on the substance. So we're going to, again, collect those data on a quarterly basis throughout 2024. We'll provide progress reports to you all as the data come in. and we'll have a summary report available in early 2025. So with that, thank you for this report and looking for your approval of this draft and survey so we can begin collecting data in 2024. Also happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Allison.
Madam
Anything-
Chair,
Yes.
Katie Howard here. I just want to be sure that board members are aware, we did receive a public comment letter and it's attached following the board report. It included several suggestions for additions to the survey.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? Yes, I see Supervisor Chavez.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report. And I was curious, could you give a little feedback on the additional questions that were received in public comment? And you know, you're thinking about which of them should be incorporated and, you know, if not, why not, kind of thing?
The questions that were brought up are really broad. They really are, they're great questions. And I think that they are questions that could probably be better answered on an individual basis by an agency. I don't know that when we're attempting to collect the number of sorts of incidents that one of the questions is about researching best practices. It's a really qualitative question. What we're trying to do here is attempt to identify a number, identify an issue that's happening, a growing issue that's happening in our local detention facilities. The questions are really detailed. They're really qualitative. They're fantastic questions. At this point, when we're trying to, again, just identify what is the problem that we're looking at in local detention facilities, it does make sense to start with a really focused variable that our agencies, large, small, technologically challenged and not, can answer in the same way. Hope that's.
I'd like to add a thought if I may, Madam Chair. Sure. This survey is a snapshot assessment to try to get at the scope of the incidences of overdoses in local detention facilities. I feel like the conversations that we're having today, generally speaking across the board on our board agenda, reflect the wide range of subject matter issues that the board is responsible for. And while it might be very helpful to have a much more detailed and a much different kind of survey, we wanted to keep this survey focus narrow and really try to get after a limited scope of inquiry. To do more is, I hate to say it, but I feel like I need to. It's really more than we have the capacity to do.
Katie, could you say, when you say, could you just say a little bit about capacity? You broke out just for a moment, so I heard we don't have capacity, but I didn't know to administer the survey or to respond to it or what?
Well, I guess I would say, Supervisor, really all of it. So the difference between a snapshot assessment, which will give this board information about what is the incidence of opioid overdose antagonist uses, it provides a single kind of data point that was the focus of what we were asked to do. Were we to design a survey with a much broader, larger scope of questions, you know, it gets far more, as Allison mentioned, into the local operation of that facility. And it's really just, in my view, beyond the scope of what the BSCC can even weigh in on at this point. So, you know, this is certainly, I think, responsive to the request that we got. And yeah, so beyond our capacity, both in designing a survey and doing meaningful things with the information once it was theoretically gathered.
Through the chair, just a follow-up question. Could you, and you raise an interesting point about scope, and I know this is going to be an ongoing struggle with the board about where that line is in terms of what is within the purview of the BSCC. So maybe just to help me understand this, is there another partner agency that you see is more appropriate to both do the research and then to respond to it?
I personally don't have any ideas that spring to mind. I don't know if my
There,
colleagues might.
there is a group through the I believe it's the local health officers association. They do have a statewide commission on opioid use, substance abuse. I know a little bit about that committee, but I believe it is centered through county public health departments. Their officers participate in that that group.
So your thinking is that the drug usage in custody is something that perhaps we should be communicating with the statewide public health entities to play a leadership role in, if anybody was going to?
I can say that that group during pandemic wasn't meeting, and I know they are in the process of meeting again. So they haven't gotten back up on their feet. That one particular opioid use group has not gotten back on their feet yet. So we can talk about what that looks like.
Just to intervene just slightly, I mean, it is a health lens that may help us out here. I'm not certain that they're the agency to go to for the depth and breadth of the questions in the letter that we received. But moving back to the abilities of this agency to broaden the scope of this, I think when it was initially conceived, and I actually believe it was you who
It was. That's why I'm
right.
wondering if I asked the right. I mean, you're right. I think through a discussion
I support you in suggesting it. I guess I think that we have to. We were looking at the incidence of the use of I call it naltrexone, but I know you have an antagonist, opioid antagonist in agencies, and I think that was really where we were headed. Understanding these questions are important and they are very broad, and I think what Katie is suggesting, that we don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. And we thought we launched rather well on your initial request, and this broadens the scope of that a great deal. And so we need to sort of have that conversation at this juncture. If I don't know the real answer to your question, like, if not you, who?
Yeah.
It could very well be a health lens. I don't know.
So
but I don't want to go down the road where we think we can answer all of these questions in a singular survey and do the analytical and staff work associated with sort of digesting that information.
So colleagues, this has given me something to think a little bit more about. And one of the reasons that I was really pressing on this is that I do think that the state of California is a little behind other parts of the country, but we're really starting to see, I know the law enforcement leaders around the table will know that we're seeing this surging in so many different places. And our law enforcement teams on the ground, I know, are working really hard to try to disrupt access, to opioids at a pretty robust level. And I do feel like the in-custody environment is a part of that as well. But here's what I'm going to recommend after just listening to this, and I'd love to hear more of my colleagues, but the authors of the of this feedback memorandum, I would be happy to meet with them and ask the sheriff here if we can take a look at how this kind of a document will or won't help. And we can ask at a local level. I'm happy to ask our health department the same questions that were raised by staff, in part because this is something we at a local level have been dealing with. And I think I shared with all of you that we actually put a Narcan dispenser in the waiting room of the jail so that both visitors and staff have access to it. So we're really trying to take a look at this. So I'm comfortable moving approval of what the staff's proposing. And at a local level, I'll request a meeting with the authors of this memo and the sheriff here and our public health department, because we're doing some opioid work here, and see, get their feedback, and maybe we can take a crack at it at a local level. And I'm happy to share the outcome of that with my colleagues on the board.
That's really a great landing spot. And I don't mean to in any way discourage further discussion about this epidemic that we're suffering. I mean, I think the president and the president of China discussed it yesterday. I mean, it is massive. It is of great concern. I just not sure we can go down that road efficiently at this point with the sort of staff issues we have.
I'm sorry, I know that we don't want to belabor this, but I just want to add that I share in some of the concerns already addressed. When I read the feedback, I mean, these questions are important, they're relevant, they're illuminating. I think we have a real opportunity here to gather information, and whether we or the statewide public health entities that we can identify as a possible partner can utilize that information in some sort of a beneficial way. I think we should really consider holding off on the survey and meeting with the groups who provided the feedback to see if we could add some questions. It doesn't have to be all of them, but even something as simple as, you know, the ratio of Narcan available per individual within the facilities is a question that I think is incredibly illuminating, or the percentage of staff trained in using and administering Narcan or identifying an overdose. I mean, I, as a juvenile defender in LA County, represent several young people who have overdosed throughout, you know, the last year. And because I had a bench officer who was willing to bring in the former chief of probation to ask these questions to, it initiated an ongoing reporting of these very important questions that have been illuminating to defenders, to the bench, to probation. And so I do think that to administer the survey as it stands in such a limited scope is really doing a disservice to the community, and really it would be a missed opportunity for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any appetite to put out the initial survey as it stands, look at the results of that, and see if there is a path forward in a different fashion?
Chair
It's
Penner.
oh,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
we're all, is the intention of the survey to, I'm kind of remembering the conversation, but is it just to get numbers? Is that what was the initial discussion about, just finding out how many times it was administered? Is that?
I think that was what we felt our directive was from the board. If I recall that conversation, and Supervisor Chavez, you probably remember it better than me because you
Yeah.
led the charge.
Yeah, I'll just say that there were two kind of outcomes. One was that I, as just a member of this board, was in fact interested in what, if any, role we needed to play, seeing these, not just fentanyl, but like and opioids, but just looking at the number of deaths that we had from people in custody having access to drugs that caused overdose, and both in juvenile and adult. So that was like the big issue. And then specifically because we had been seeing fentanyl deaths, and frankly, with the new types of the even stronger fentanyl, we're seeing more of it and easier access of it. So I think initially the staff persuaded me that, again, the scope of the group is limited. And so could we look and see how big the problem actually was? And I think that's why they landed on, you know, being able to quantify what are we seeing in terms of overdoses in custody. So I think that was the reason the staff And I think it makes sense to just understand how big a problem are we talking about. So maybe, and then again, recognizing that when this was raised, there was some concern that we were kind of coloring outside our lines. Now, personally, the reason I didn't think it was coloring outside is I think the fact that people can get drugs inside a facility it's a safety issue. And I know for those who run facilities, you know that that's something you work really hard to make sure you don't have contraband coming in. So I didn't see it as disconnected, but did understand the staff's preference for quantifying the problem.
That's right.
I appreciate all the comments, and I think that the points raised by these entities are well made. And I understand the need to try to keep this to a quantitative. But as I look at that, I think there are some of the questions that we could add that are also quantitative or close to quantitative. I think, for example, their number 10 maybe is already picked up in the proposed number 7. But they also want to know how often, if these are they used by inmates as opposed to staff? That seems to be a pretty easy question. So
And
I
that's
think,
in there too, yeah.
I think though that I would probably prefer that we delay this, that we look at it, that we see whether or not further discussion with some of those entities might help illuminate what they really need and what we really can do, and see if maybe we can reach something that's more of a consensus.
Okay. Sure.
So just as a sheriff that runs these facilities, I want to add a couple of things, and it's something I'll go back to prison realignment. Some of the entities that are listed on the letter that sent actually have engaged in a number of things, mutually agreed upon consent decrees and things of that nature. And what we run into in the differences between the BSCC, and I'll use like Title 15, for example, that's the minimum qualifications. That's what the BSCC holds us to. When we enter into these other agreements, we're actually agreeing to a higher standard than what the BSCC does. So looking at their list, for instance, when you talk about searching employees and what do, that's a change in working conditions that obviously isn't always just left up to the facility administrator to say, hey, do this and do this now. There are negotiations that have to occur, legal issues, and a number of those things. Also, in the probation environment, you have flash incarcerations, 1170Hs. I have a jail intelligence team, and I can tell you many of those narcotics come from those flash incarcerations that are known by prison gangs. They're essentially ordering somebody to secrete those drugs on their body and bring them into the facility. Laws have changed about strip searches and a number of things that prevent us to go in there, but technology is also lend us a helping hand in terms of having body scanners and things to try to find these secreted drugs. And I can just tell you, we've traced back some of these cases, found the orders, found the people responsible, but it still doesn't prevent that person from bringing it in. And then all of a sudden you have 7 fentanyl overdoses on your hands. So this is a very wide ranging piece. And for the BSCC to really go out and do that, going back to what Allison suggested to all of us and really keeping it a little bit more localized, as a large county, I have many resources I can touch and can probably do most of the things that are being suggested in here, but many of the other counties cannot. And going back to the minimum standards and what we can and can't do, you very easily get out of something that would be outside the control of this body. And it is a very dynamic issue. And there are a number of best practices that we could certainly put out there as a result of this, but it's whether or not each county would have the ability to actually implement those best practices. Some are costly. I run dogs through my facility. Not every county can afford a dog. But it's a much more complicated task than I think everybody realizes that what we're asking for. I personally think this is a good start. And it may develop more questions after we get this out there, and then we can have some of these groups and maybe get it down. And I too, just like you, Supervisor Chavez, I'd be more than happy to engage in my county and some of those same things and bring it back to us in the group and see if maybe we can localize this a little bit more to give the board really good feedback, because there's a number of things that aren't even mentioned in here in the letter, like flash incarcerations that are probably pertinent to how those things are getting in. Even some of the questions, if they ask what happens to a person, we have to remember that when you bring narcotics onto a jail facility, that's a felony. So if it's an employee that brings it on there, they're getting arrested in my county. and they're booked. It just happened to us about a month ago. So there's a number of examples that become much more complicated than I would think that Allison and her crew are going to be able to wrap their heads around that quickly. I think we need to get started somewhere, and my opinion is the survey would be a good idea in its current form.
Madam Chair, I would agree with Sheriff, just based on the conversation we had at the last meeting and wanting to be able to get something out into the field, to be able to get an idea of where counties are, both adult and on the juvenile side, just so that we can see where we land, and just so that we can see how impacted people are. And then given that data that we have, then it gives us a foundation to ask those kind of other questions that I think that are being pointed out here in this letter, and then others that may not be included here. But I think it's the data need is so great that I would say that we would move forward with the survey as recommended. It may be a couple of as Judge Guard mentioned, that might be some easier ones that are really around, pretty easily retrievable data that we could add to the survey. But I think the data is that important that I would not want to have to, if we don't have to delay it not much longer before we can get it out into the field. And then with the data that we collect, then if there are those further questions that we need to ask, because I think the biggest thing for me is, what are those best practices? What are those other things that we may not be doing, or what counties can do? Because Sheriff Dykes is correct, is that some counties don't have the ability or the resources to do everything, but what are other people doing so that we can get that information out? But we need a foundation to know where we are initially.
Well, we've come full circle back to me, and I think we can possibly bifurcate this process, and we can see if some of these items suggested are quick fits into the survey. And I think there are a couple, as from my really second and third reading of this. Some of them are much greater in scope and going to be very difficult to tackle. In fact, as I read this originally, I thought, well, this would be a really good premise for an RFP to go out to tackle opioid use in jails. I mean, there are suggestions, and there's some practices that may come into play. We're not there yet, but we could get the baseline data, and maybe somebody will make an argument for taking this further down the road. I don't have a motion in mind. We could ask staff to incorporate the quantitative issues posed in this letter into the survey and bring it back. That does prolong the time it's going to take to get the survey out. And if you're comfortable with that, I think that's a really decent way to proceed, rather than taking any sort of vote now. Move it back to staff to include the measures that we can actually conform with and achieve. Yes.
Do you think, Allison, that you could include number 9 at this point?
So number 9, when opioid antagonists are used, how often is it administered by jail staff versus incarcerated people? So I'm just sliding back and forth between. So if you look at question 7, oh geez,
I think 7 picks up their 10.
Yes. So what I think, so if you look at the availability question, we do ask, is it available to people housed in the facilities? I know that's only part of it. So I look at the second page, which is going to be related to the incidents. And I suspect what we could probably do is incorporate it into 9. I think you might have said that too. Who administered that, the Narcan? And the question just is, and it should be available. It's not the only thing we think about, but one of the things that we want to think about, because we want to get data, we want to get good data, we want to get data on a timely fashion, is can the agencies actually produce that, produce those data? So it would modify 9 to say who administered. I think we can certainly incorporate that.
Okay, maybe
And it
we
would-
could go ahead with the survey with that one incorporated and then follow through with the second step and see what we're talking about. Lynn.
Yeah, I think it's a simple
The,
solution
the, sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
the tricky part is going to be if, and I'll look to people that are running facilities, say there are, because oftentimes there are multiple uses of the substance. So perhaps if it were a custody staff that provided the first dosage and then a medical staff came in and they provided another dose, it might get murky. I do want to say that it is possible that it might get murky if multiple people are administering the Narcan. I think that's a possibility. And those are just the things, I'm pretending I'm the research person now, just thinking about ways that data get murky.
Maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
it seems to me that what you really want to find out is it an inmate or is it someone else? The professional staff is really the most important. And maybe it can just be that is at least as a first step.
Sure. Oh, yeah, that's pretty easy. It could be both too.
Yeah. And I would think,
but
Allison, it
yeah.
would be one of those survey questions that would have to indicate if known.
Or-
And part of it, I know from hearing about this from our research staff, there might be a single overdose incident and many Narcan doses are administered. So I think that's the murkiness that Allison's talking about too. But at least we could try to break it down and indicate if known, and then see what the data show.
Okay, there's a suggestion for a modification. Is it to be inclusive of anything that is quantitative, or are we picking out item 9 and?
Item 9 is what I
Okay.
thought we were
All right.
doing to say, if known, who administered the Narcan, and then there'd be choice, multiple choice
So we're
options.
singling out that one and in an attempt to move forward expeditiously, correct? Okay. All right, I'm looking to the board for any questions or comments. Anyone in the public have a question and comment on this item?
Yes, we do have members of the public, so let's give it a second to screen share that list. There it goes. So first it's Nancy. Nancy, do you want to raise your hand so I can find you real quick? Are you still there? There you are. All right, Nancy, you will have 2 minutes. Please unmute yourself.
Nancy Juarez, Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. Yes, absolutely. I would love to meet with Supervisor Chavez and any board member that's interested in working on this survey further. I can 100% commit to meeting and having the survey in good shape by the next February 15th BSCC board meeting. The feedback that we offered was not meant to be punitive. I co-authored that feedback on the survey with the intention to be collaborative with the BSCC. CJCJ shares Supervisor Chavez's concerns. We have monitored overdoses at DJJ up until its closure. We want to continue to do this monitoring work. We want to be a partner in this. The survey is not mandating the counties to do anything but answer questions. And if they don't have answers, that's good data too. It shows the counties that need support. The same way that BSCC now collects COVID data, we hope that they will adopt our feedback into the survey. Transparently, I wish we could have done more with the survey. Even given the short timeline, we weren't able to, but I'm confident that we can meet in the interim to have something that we all feel content with by February 15th. And we heard earlier, the mother of Brian Diaz appeared in front of the LA Probation Commission to share her pain, concerns, and path forward to ensure that nobody loses their son the same tragic way. How did Brian have access to fentanyl? CJ and other partners put the survey together to try to answer that question because we care. We don't want to lose another brother, another sister, another father, another mother, another child in California's facilities. On September 21st, 2023, there was a Riverside County deputy that was found with 100 pounds of fentanyl pills. He was arrested for possessing 104 pounds of fentanyl while on duty. A few days before that, September 15th, a sheriff's deputy was accused of being under the influence in Riverside County Jail. I only raise this because the annual number of deaths in Riverside County has only increased in recent years, with 2020 seeing the second highest number of in-custody deaths in the last 15 years, behind 2022. And overall, I just want to emphasize that I want to work with the board. We want to work with the board. I'm confident we can get the survey in a place that we're all happy with by February 15th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Sarah Vargas. Sarah, are you still there? Please raise your hand. There you are. All right, Sarah, go ahead and unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Sarah Vargas, and I'm calling in from the San Fernando Valley. I'm a community member that's deeply concerned about the presence of opioids in juvenile hall facilities. Although officers do countless searches and pat-downs of family members entering the facility, our youth continue to die from drug overdose, and the probation department tries to blame families for smuggling in opioids to their loved ones. But families are already traveling so far to visit their children and their loved ones, which begs the question of why they would risk being turned away, let alone even arrested for carrying opioids, especially when they already get turned away for ridiculous rules about what they choose to wear. I really just want to emphasize that our children really deserve to grow in the warm embrace of our communities at home and not wither in these juvenile halls. Thank you.
I'm not sure if you could hear me.
Adrina, I'm sorry. You go ahead and speak. You have 2 minutes.
I'm not sure if I heard correctly about how data is collected. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you said you're unable to you're unable to accurately collect every overdose from every person. And your job is to deliver accuracy. So how can you put numbers together, leave out important information and data if you can't accurately collect everybody's? You're going to give everyone accurate information. That's concerning too, that you can't have the team to accurately do this survey. How many people are overdosed that you can't do this or obtain this information? And I believe someone said that gangs are responsible for bringing it in. That's not true at all. LA Times wrote that the officers and teachers are the ones being escorted out these facilities, not gang members. And you also say you can identify the people but can't stop it. That statement's very contradicting. By identifying the people is how you stop it. So maybe you're not really identifying the people. And bringing contraband into a government facility, you guys say is charges that result into being arrested and detained, but yet the officers and teachers are out on leave and not arrested. So that's why there's so many problems, because you allow it to continue. You give no real solution. A program, in my opinion, so bad, might as well just let put in a program for the kids to learn how to distribute Narcan for emergencies, for the lack of staff, so they could take on probation's job, I guess. But I ran into a program with Youth Justice LA where they have a street credibility team that teaches kids to distribute Narcan and to teach others to prevent stuff like this from happening. So maybe you should introduce these type of programs into the juvenile halls to avoid things like this from happening.
Adrina, your 2 minutes is up. Please finish your thought.
You try to do a survey without the capacity or the team to do it. How about just rehabilitating our programs instead of doing a survey? That's a real solution for you right there. Because for me, it's just like, unless you're going to collect everyone's data, you're going to give us a bunch of information that is not accurate. And that's just from a logical point of view. Thank you.
Okay, next we have MJ Hart. Please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, hello again. As I shared earlier, I'm a survivor of both the juvenile and adult criminal justice systems. During my time in those systems, it was the staff bringing in contraband, staff bringing in drugs. It is taking a look at this survey. It is very alarming that you think that, or whatever significant or correlations you're trying to obtain from this survey, as someone who's ran many research designs, this is very superficial. It is only for looking for data that's after the fact. And as a board member has stated earlier, you just arrested a correction officer who was bringing in contraband. You said you ran a dog. Not everyone can run a dog. Okay. But this is your responsibility to keep these children safe. And this survey, it is to my knowledge and my lived experience and my educational background, this survey is not going to yield the data or the results that is needed to keep the youth safe. I think the feedback that the public comment letter that is attached, there is a lot of great questions on there that you need to incorporate that is more for preventative measures and data that's actually going to be accurate to who's actually bringing the drugs in, who's actually bringing this contraband, who's actually responsible for the deaths of these children. And this survey is not satisfactory. Miss Juarez has came and advocated that people are ready to work with y'all. You just got to open up and be working for the youth and their best interests and every human that's in these facilities under your care and under the oversight, your oversight. This is a privilege and a responsibility. And I really hope that you all are taking it serious. And this is a great way to start. The data is needed, but these questions aren't going to do it. You need to have specific questions and you need to address that staff are bringing these drugs in. It's been 25 plus years and this is still happening. No, please do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Israel. Oh, where did he go?
I got unmuted, and I'm not Israel. Thank you.
Red, I'm gonna hold on to you and we'll come back, but Israel was here first, so let's have him talk. Israel, please go ahead, unmute yourself.
Sir, thank you. Good afternoon, muy buenas tardes. My name is Israel Salazar Villa with the California Alliance for Youth and Community Justice. Echoing the concerns of other community members who just spoke on this item, this survey feels very, very, very superficial and really like you don't want to get to the bottom of this, snapshot assessment, I don't believe is what's needed, right? I think we need a full assessment when lives are on the line and lives have been lost in both the juvenile and adult part of these conversations. Access to opioids. Myself, I'm also done a whole lot of time in juvenile and adult. And in my experience and very successful experience, it was usually staff and officers who bring it in, right? And thus far, I'm well aware, and we're well aware that juvenile probation officers in Los Angeles, in Fresno, in Alameda have been caught. More recently, article just came out. Once again, probation. So at the same time, there's a huge concern with young people being charged as adults for getting caught with this contraband that probation officers are bringing in, while probation officers get paid administrative leave. So just the utter hypocrisy of y'all system stakeholders and your approach to justice and accountability, and quite frankly, being real comfortable throwing the hammer at indigenous and people of color and things like that. But when it comes to your peers, your colleagues, we don't see that same hammer. So what does accountability look like, and when are we going to hold system stakeholders accountable? Because thus far, this board has extremely failed to do that. And thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Red, we'll go back to you. You could unmute and you'll have 2 minutes.
Hello, my name is Red. I live in the greater Southern California, Los Angeles area. I haven't been around in a minute to these meetings, but I found this agenda item at the very start of the conversation was very lazy. The person at the podium didn't even want to address the questions, and I've seen the questions. They're not that qualitative. One of the questions that we're addressing best practices are facilities researching best practices for reducing smuggling of drugs. Like, are they? It's a very simple question. Is one facility, is any facility researching this? And I think y'all should know that. The jail staff facility, for jail staff, can they be searched? I understand like the legal issues around that. That is a good point. But at the same time, a lot of you have addressed the bare minimum and that you are set to do the bare minimum. But you have liability on you. You have kids' lives on you. Brian Diaz died on May 9th, 2023. His mother spoke here. His mother is still grieving. And all these instances that Israel had mentioned are not isolated incidents. Sheriff Chad Bianco still talks about the epidemic of fentanyl, the dangers of fentanyl, his tough on crime on fentanyl, but he never talks about saving a life from an overdose. These trainings, these teachings of how to administrate Narcan are also not that hard. If you've seen the nasal Narcan, they have a step-by-step directions on how to administrate Narcan. So these teachings, and also we talked about more than one person giving Narcan. You can give more than one dose of Narcan in
Red, your 2 minutes is
light.
up. Please wrap up your thought.
You can give more than one dose of Narcan and the person will not be in any greater danger. So again, as some other people in the public comment has said, do better, really look at yourselves and think of the lives that you have in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as you could see, Nancy is next on the list, but as she has already spoken, I will come back to her and go to Tahita. Tahita, please raise your hand so we could find you. If you are still there. There you are. All right, please unmute. You have 2 minutes.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is weird because there's no like mic option like a regular Zoom. So, hi, my name is Sarah Shakur. I'm the director of organizing with Youth Justice Coalition. I did prepare a speech, but I feel like I'm going to speak from the heart, especially from all the things I heard earlier today. I think it is barbaric and wild the fact that folks have money and structure in order to support dogs, but keep investing in failed facilities that are killing community members, specifically children. The future is dying and the future is in y'all hands, and y'all still continuing to invest in and sustain structures that have proven time and time again that has proven time and time again that these structures cannot be trusted. And instead of investing in communities and calling communities to the table, y'all continue to keep giving structures that have historically killed Black, brown, Indigenous children and communities chances to keep killing us. I am coming to you as someone that has been impacted by these facilities, that has had a dad in these facilities, that has had a sister in these facilities, and ask you to really think about the things that you are doing and the things that you're voting on. If you keep giving these facilities chances to kill people, you will continue doing that. Blood is on all of your hands. That is all I have to say. Goodbye.
Thank you. Now, Nancy, you raised your hand again. Did you still want to talk? Please raise your hand if you still do.
I think that might be an error, Adam, because didn't she already speak on this item?
Yes, she did.
Okay,
Okay.
I
So
think
then
we'll stop there then.
we'll move on. And we have one in the room. That's Avalon. Oh, sorry.
Hello again, everybody. Thank you to the board members who took seriously the feedback provided by a variety of organizations and initiated a real conversation about this. It's really appreciated when you all respond to the written and verbal comment that we provide. Community-based organizations were asked by Allison to provide feedback on this survey, and the ones who wrote this letter are working directly with incarcerated folks and their families who have been immediately impacted by opioid overdoses. So we ask that you all consider our expertise with the same weight as that of sheriffs, who are of course going to resist attempts at increased oversight of their employees, right? This is a clear conflict of interest. I'm not sure why the board is even considering the potential workload of sheriff's departments in responding to this survey when this board has been tasked with jail oversight, not providing sheriffs shelter from oversight. Riverside County has recently been in the news for correctional deputies being arrested for possessions of millions of dollars worth of fentanyl pills. There is no information available about how Riverside or other local facilities are ensuring the staff are not responsible for bringing deadly contraband into these facilities. The BSCC can and should request a wide array of information from sheriff's departments about how they are responding to this real threat to the well-being of incarcerated people. Some board members are speaking about county costs when this is a proposal to simply gather information so we know how to respond appropriately. It is the responsibility of local law enforcement agencies to be transparent about how they are preventing and responding to this public health crisis. It is equally the responsibility of the BSCC to gather data, both qualitative and quantitative, about the conditions in custody. Again, I just find it really frustrating that community is being told that this is quote unquote beyond the scope of the BSCC's work, right? I think it's important to distinguish when this agency is refusing oversight responsibility out of lack of desire rather than lack of legal authority. This is the state agency tasked with jail oversight and data collection. This is it, right? And so we're asking you to step into your power, take responsibility for gathering this information across counties as our loved ones continue to get sick and die in custody. I think Chair Penner asked the right question. If not you, who? If not now, when? These people their safety and well-being is in your hands. And so we appreciate the board members who are taking that responsibility seriously. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more public comments, Madam Chair.
So if I may, I think we were headed in a direction where we were going to do as much as we could to add questions that we think we could manage onto the survey from the suggested issues raised in the letter. Are we comfortable with that? I mean, we probably need to close in on this and decide where we're at with that. Any board members?
I think we should take Nancy's suggestion that we meet before the February meeting. I'm not sure if we need to identify now what board members want to be a part of that discussion. I would love to be a part of that discussion. Look closely at the survey as it stands and look at the suggested items. What I heard from Nancy was that they could have, spent more time thinking about the suggested questions. And so I'd like to give those groups that time and we reconvene as a smaller group and then vote on a survey in February.
Okay, I hear you. And I thought that there was some urgency in trying to do it before February. And I'm comfortable with wherever the board lands on that. If we're going to hold the survey and have a small group meet and consider these issues raised in the letter, and I believe Supervisor Chavez, I heard you saying that you would entertain leading that.
I'm happy to. So I think if I'm comfortable with seconding Angelis's motion, and then so yes on that. I think take the time. I think there's no downside. I want to thank the staff for moving because I was really pressuring you all, and we're telling you to hurry up and stop or slow down, which I think is fine. And then I would love Sheriff Dykes, I would love to get some time with you and take a look at what we can do in our counties, because I do think taking a look at what if we can take a deeper dive, that might also be beneficial for the board as a whole, if you're still open to that.
Supervisor, you can count on, I'd be happy to do that. And I think my point is let's start somewhere. And Allison came up with a list, but this is a much more complicated issue. I hope I at least brought that to light than people even realize. And I think it's a great conversation, and just know that your sheriffs really across the state are trying to take care of this. I heard a lot of public comment and a number of things in reference to, employees and their involvement. And it's just a very difficult issue to wrap your head around, but I'd be more than happy to be involved in anything that adds more question to this, or certainly gives us all data that moves us in the correct direction.
Okay, thank you, and thank you. So let's move on down the road here, and Supervisor Chavez has agreed to do that. I think I heard Angelis volunteer to participate, and can't have more than 3 board members on an issue because we violate, unless, I don't know, is that illegal? That's the last thing I want to do.
I mean, I need to understand a little bit more of the framework of what the different tasks are. Yeah, if we have.
I don't think that has to be solved now. I threw it out as, I'm not going to look for any more volunteers, and if we get to have another one, we'll consider that in a bit. So, we're going to construct a meeting and consider the suggestions in the letter. And in the meantime, Supervisor Chavez and Sheriff Dykus will meet independent of that. And do you need more direction, Allison?
Nope.
You're smiling at me, but okay. So I don't think we need a motion, a second, or a vote on that. We just have direction. I do want to be sure
I want to be sure that we understand the direction.
Yeah.
So Supervisor Chavez, with staff's participation and
right.
assistance, will convene a meeting to include Angeles and the groups that authored this letter to talk about potential revisions to this survey. And then we would bring some revised version back to this board in February. Is that,
Right.
is that the upshot? Okay.
I think that is the upshot. And I just, for clarity, so we don't leave this standing, I think it was misunderstood. It is the BSCC that was concerned about resources and our ability to dive totally into this. Now, I know there's disagreement with whether we can or cannot, but we are going to now. And we'll be back in February, and we'll construct a group and a meeting time and move forward from there. Is that agreeable to all parties? Okay. I don't think we need a vote, do we, Council? Thank you.
I would just like to say thank you to Allison and your group, because I think you did what was asked of you. And these groups came forward with a letter that required us to take some further look at it. But thank you to you.
Thanks.
Okay. And Allison, don't bother leaving. We're going on to item K, local detention facilities inspection update.
Yes.
Oh,
We're at item I.
oh,
Proposed
my
revisions.
apologies. I
Sorry,
marked
we
it off like a
yeah.
goofer. All right. Item I.
Hello again, Allison.
It's still
Ganter.
Allison. I was half right.
Sorry. Deputy Director with the FSO Division and Research Divisions. As Katie mentioned in her presentation, effective January, goodness gracious, July 2024, we will have a Director of In-Custody Death who will be responsible for reviewing all investigations of deaths in custody and making recommendations to agency administrators related to those deaths. There's already a regulation in place, Section 1046, Death in Custody, that requires agencies to conduct an initial operational review of each death in custody and to have certain members of their team, the medical and mental health teams on that, working on that initial operational review. So what we're looking to do, and you have a copy in your binder of the proposed regulations, what we're looking to do is amend that regulation to require that initial operational review contains specific information, and then also require that agency administrators submit that report to BSCC within 60 days of that death. A revision will also require administrators to send the already required Department of Justice report of death in custody to the BSCC as well. These reports will serve as a necessary first step in the director reviewing those investigations as required by statute. Due to the lengthy rulemaking process and projecting an effective date that aligns with the start date of the director, staff's requesting permission to begin the rulemaking process, which will include a public comment period. Everything will be posted on our website for people interested in participating in that process. And also approval of this specific language. And if there are no changes made to this language after the public comment period, approving that staff file that language with the Office of Administrative Law with the final statement of reasons. It is a timely process with the Office of Administrative Law. So again, we're projecting to have this effective at the same time the director is on board. We do anticipate that there will be additional regulation revisions as the director and their team begins their work. Again, this is a necessary and timely first step. Again, if there are no changes to the language before the final statement of reasons is prepared, we do anticipate this regulation being effective July 1st, 2024. And looking for your approval and also happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Allison. Any questions, comments from the board members? It's a impressive efficiency that we're getting ahead of this. There'll be a regulation on the day the statute becomes effective. So any members of the public that wish to comment?
I do not have.
Anybody in the room that wants to comment on this item? Okay. Requesting approval of item I. I'm looking for a motion and a second.
Recommend we move the staff recommendation.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes. Aye. Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Ms. Zaragoza,
Aye.
Ms. Kumpion.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion passes for agenda item I.
Thank you. Moving now to item K, local detention facilities inspection update. Allison?
Yes, if you could give me one moment to share my screen here. Great, okay. Still the same person. I am now here to provide a regular update on the status of our facility. That's not me, I don't think. Inspections. Okay, and outstanding items of non-compliance. We are 1 month away from the end of the first year of the 23-24 biennial inspection cycle and are on target to complete all of our comprehensive inspections of county jails and juvenile detention facilities by the end of December. I'm going to begin with the adult items of non-compliance first and then shift to the juvenile items. And I will include updates on substantive matters during my review. In your binder, you have a copy of the outstanding items of non-compliance as of yesterday evening. I realize that the print is kind of small. It's also available on a link in the agenda item, so you can scroll through those items as well. I will share that at this moment, there's no items of non-compliance where staff recommends a sheriff or chief of probation to come before the board. And for the most part, agencies are working through their stated corrective action plans. However, I'm going to request the board for approval to request 2 sheriffs before the board if they don't meet compliance in a future inspection. I'll get into detail on that in just a moment. So I made a little chart. Hopefully you can see this. This is just the Title 15, the current items of non-compliance and the numbers of them in adult detention facilities. As of today, there's currently 147 items of non-compliance. Many of these items are policy issues in 7 individual facilities in San Diego. That is why the number of items in San Diego is so high. They have submitted a corrective action plan. Many of their items of non-compliance are related to policy updates, and our field representative is on track to conduct a reinspection this month to verify those items of correction. So hopefully there will be some movement and drop off of those items. A quarter of those 147 items in adult facilities are, they remain physical plant issues. Some are related to crowding, others are related to the need for maintenance. So I'll go over the top 6 items of non-compliance with Title 15 in the adult facilities, starting from the bottom. One is the 10% of the items of non-compliance are out of cell time. You'll recall that we increased the number. We created a regulation that calls for out of cell time to include 3 hours of exercise and 7 hours of recreation over a period of 7 days. Many of the same issues remain. Agencies are figuring out how to ensure that everybody in their facility and people that require different levels of classification can safely get out of their cells. They are working through those issues, and that is currently the most common item of noncompliance. There are a number of items of noncompliance with 1265, issue of personal care items. Those are all in San Diego. Again, there are multiple issues. There were multiple issues found of specific items not being handed out to individuals in those facilities. All of those are in San Diego County and the 7 facilities that they have there. 1027, number of personnel, which we can also call staffing. That is the regulation that identifies when agencies are unable to fulfill their Title 15 obligations because of a lack of staffing. So there are 7% of the items are related to staffing. The majority are agency-wide staffing shortages. All of the agencies in question are communicating with their Board of Supervisors, which is the entity that can ultimately fund help with recruitment and retention of those staff members. 1056, use of sobering cell. There remain in several facilities issues with documentation and safety checks and sobering cells. Use of restraint devices. There are some issues with reporting on documentation, and also in San Diego. The 6 of those items of non-compliance, and again, this is just to explain the array of issues that create items of non-compliance. There's a new requirement in regulation that requires an agency's policy to list the manufacturer's maximum recommended time for that restraint device. The products that San Diego is using, they could not find, the manufacturer would not state such a maximum time frame. So they're mitigating their policy, and we're looking for how to move forward with that. They're in compliance with how they use their restraint devices and all other policy. It's an interesting item of non-compliance there. And then finally, 1027 safety checks, which, as you know, is a really important indicator that people housed in detention facilities are being properly supervised and that their health and welfare is being checked on. I want to quickly go over each of the items because this is where I want to set up an action related to some inspections next week. So of those 8 items of non-compliance and safety checks, 1 is a policy update, and that's Plumas. 2 are currently in the process of being corrected, Mendocino and Inyo County. And 2, Del Norte and Lassen, are dealing with staffing shortages. They've taken mitigating action to deal with those issues of non-compliance. Again, all of those items of non-compliance remain. Our team continues to go out and do follow-up on those inspections. Los Angeles County and Alameda County are both out of compliance with safety checks. And also in Los Angeles, it was recently reported that a person was found dead after not being checked on for several hours. And also in Alameda County, it was reported a few years ago that a person was found unresponsive after several hours of not being checked. Both of those counties have submitted timely corrective action plans. Both of their timeframes for correction are within this week and the next week. And so our team, our field representatives are going to re-inspect those counties next week. Both, like I said, both counties are being re-inspected for verification of correction next week because of the potential life and safety issues related to non-compliance with safety checks. What we're recommending as staff is that if those agencies are found non-compliant next week, that those sheriffs or whoever is not in compliance comes before the board, before you all in February to talk about these items of non-compliance. Again, we will inspect them next week. What we're asking is that if they are out of compliance next week, that you allow staff to request those sheriffs to appear before the board in February. Again, we're out there providing technical assistance and follow-up visits in all of these agencies, not just specific ones that have the issues you see before you. And just a really couple quick updates to other items that our team is working on. We're currently tracking the estimated cost of compliance for our legislative report. We will have that all prepared when we prepare a report to the legislature at the end of our inspection cycle. We'll also probably do some progress reporting. And we're also completing a survey on visitation in local detention facilities. We are required to monitor modes and availability of visitation in adult detention facilities as per the penal code. So we do collect that information in our comprehensive inspection, but we're also surveying counties so we can get a statewide picture. Almost all the county jails have reported so far, and we'll continue to include that information in our reporting as well. So on to juvenile issues. We have the same, I was somehow able to sort it the other way for the juvenile issues. There's currently 38 items of non-compliance in 3 counties, Los Angeles, Stanislaus, and Santa Barbara. These are the outstanding items of non-compliance in those counties collectively. Just a couple quick updates on those 3 counties. In Santa Barbara, we've received their cap, their county resolution date. We received their cap last week. Their county resolution for correction of their items of non-compliance is next Monday, which is well before the 90 days that the statute allows for correction. I wanted to point that out. So our team will be re-inspecting those items in Santa Barbara to verify compliance. Stanislaus, their corrective action plan due date is the 19th of November, which is actually Sunday. We are hoping to have that corrective action plan soon, and we'll update our records. And as soon as we have their corrective action plan and provide the necessary follow-up and re-inspection for them as well. Los Angeles, their juvenile halls, the 2 juvenile halls, Barry J. Nydorf and Los Padrinos, those facilities remain in corrective action. They are working through their corrective action plan. Their resolution dates for verification of corrective action is in January. We are working with the department on certain documents and information that we've requested from them and are working through those issues. We are also waiting for corrective action plans in 2 of their camps, Page and Page and Kilpatrick. So we're waiting for 2 more corrective action plans from Los Angeles. I think that is all of the open questions. I'll pause there and see if there are any questions from board members.
Any members of the board have questions, comments?
Yes, Allison. So as it relates to the 2 camps with the cap and for Page and Kilpatrick, what is the timetable for those?
Kilpatrick is due the 27th. And I believe that Page is due the 9th of December. Sorry about that, 9th of December. If you give me 2 seconds, I can grab
they
that
both
pretty
December
quickly.
dates or is one November? and the
No,
other
November 27th, I apologize. November 27th for, I don't want to, it'll take me just a second to pull those up. November 27th for Kilpatrick and the 9th of December for Page.
Anything further? Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Get it? Los
Oh,
Padrinos.
Toledo, I remember that.
You indicated here that you were advised that room confinement was not occurring and didn't receive any documentation.
Can-
And
Can you
then,
let me know what you're looking at? I'm sorry.
yes, I'm looking at the list and it's the Los Padrinos.
Okay.
And it has to do with room confinement. It's maybe 2/3 of the way down of what I see as a page.
At inspection, no documentation was
Yes.
provided. Okay,
Can you
great.
tell us a
Thank
little
you.
bit more about that?
May I please read it really quickly? Yeah.
Yeah,
My
absolutely.
brain holds only so much. Thank you. So what the issue there is, and again, this just, again, it illustrates how the evidence for finding compliance and non-compliance and the reasons for compliance and non-compliance for each individual regulation can vary. So what happened is in our conversations with particularly the young people, they would report that room confinement is happening. Staff would make comments. I don't want to be too specific because I don't know the exact conversations. Staff would report to BSCC staff that, oh yeah, paraphrasing here, we put the kids in their rooms for 2 hours after meal. However, when we requested documentation for that room confinement, there was none produced. So again, there's evidence that young people were put in room confinement, but we had no documentation to review. So those reports were enough to give us evidence of non-compliance.
So I find that disconcerting.
Yeah, it's.
So who was it that told you that they did not do that? And is that an issue that needs to be followed up on?
100%, it's an issue that needs to be followed up. And again, the inspector is the person that reports on the facility inspection report, and they were the person that was reported to by staff and by young people that they were being placed in room confinement. However,
I guess I didn't state that very well. I find that really disturbing that you are being told one thing.
Yes.
When you are down there for an
Yes.
inspection. So what
Yes.
accountability do we have for someone who's not providing correct
Yeah.
information, either inadvertently when they should know better or intentionally?
that's why they're out of compliance, number one. And then, partially, the agencies, if an agency isn't following their own policy and procedure, there's measures that they will have to take through their disciplinary measures or counseling, HR, those types of things. I agree. It's very disconcerting. And again, why, when you get that many reports, that's enough of evidence for us to note them out of compliance. Room confinement is happening, but we can't review the documentation to see if it was under 4 hours or the other elements of the regulation were being met. So we'll go back and do our reinspection. Again, it's going to be interesting to see if the agencies are able to produce documentation of room confinement if if it's still being reported that room confinement is happening, but there's no documentation, or if there's documentation, we're going to make sure that it's meeting the requirements of the regulation.
Yes.
So one other question, there's a reference to programming and that in some instances, programming is not happening at all. I think it's 4 or 5 below where you just were.
Which facility is it?
1 second. It is in Los Padrinos and it's at 1371 Programs, Recreation and Exercise. And it says, quote, programs programs are not consistently being provided, or in some cases at all.
Mhm.
Staff are not provided with resources to provide programming. So when the note is at all, and that's hard to fathom. I'm assuming there's some type of programming, but do you mean like recreational programming, non-school related programming?
No, this is the section of that regulation that's required for the trauma-informed programming that relates to, in some way to the young person's, assessment and plan. There was, when that inspection was conducted, that programs weren't happening in some units at all. It was very clear that that wasn't happening, and there was no documentation to provide evidence of programs happening in some of those units in that facility.
So a more general question, a number of these things seem to be related to staffing levels in the facility. And I would presume then that Los Angeles has incorporated a staffing recruitment and training plan as part of their CAP. And is that currently adequate to meet their timelines?
Their corrective action plan as written, if they are able to, it's hard for us to say because what we're inspecting for is that they meet compliance with the regulation. How they meet staffing requirements is going to be up to that agency. It's really hard to say if it's adequate because I know the processes for bringing people on board aren't. It takes a long time. So what's going to have to be evident when we re-inspect are two things. Our Title 15 required not just programs, but other programs, things like safety checks and exercise and recreation as well. Are those elements being provided? If they are, and there's still a staffing shortage, those Title 15 minimum standards can still be in compliance. But if they're not being done and there is a link to lack of staffing, they'll end up being out of compliance with both of those. I don't know that directly answers the question. It's hard to answer because they're working through that process. They could correct being able to provide programs, and then they could not be able to correct their staffing issues. That could happen.
Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
So one more thing. So during the course of the, just say, LA County probation being under this cap, when the inspection is done, is it scheduled or is it one of those unannounced during that course of their cap?
So we have done unannounced inspections during that corrective action plan process. We do not have inspections scheduled right now for Los Angeles. I don't know if that's a really great answer. We haven't scheduled an inspection yet, unannounced or announced. And I guess it will depend on what things look like as we move forward. But we can do unannounced inspections.
Yeah, I'm just curious, just to see how that process works so that we make sure that the cap is truly being addressed, that we're making sure that the, probation department is doing what they're saying that they've corrected.
And we have historically, if you look back between all of the different inspections that have happened and corrective action plan and suitability processes in that county, we have done, I think what you're asking is, have we done interim inspections? We have done those in Los Angeles before and other agencies as well.
Thank you, Alice.
Madam Chair. Yes, Allison, maybe if you could please just remind the board, and particularly for Jason, the dates. I know it's early January. I don't remember off the top of my head, both for the Barry J. Nydorf SYTF and Los Padrinos, their 90-day correction period ends in early January. We will absolutely be on site to verify whether they've met all the requirements of their cap. And maybe you could say what those dates are, Ally? I'm sure you have it handy.
In Los Padrinos, it is their agency The 90 days is the 15th of January. Their county target date is the 10th of January. In Barry J. Nydorf, their 90 days is the 8th of January. Their county resolution date is the 5th of January. So again, we will be verifying correction of those items in Barry J. Nydorf on January 5th and in Los Padrinos on January 10th.
And when we say verifying, there are certain things that certainly can be verified in writing, so we'll get documentation from the facility, but we will also anticipate being on site prior to the February board meeting so that we can give you the very latest information.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to, if they are out of compliance, we would be doing a determination of suitability at the February board meeting.
And I will 100% bring back updates on these issues when we meet again in February.
Yes. Any other questions, comments from board members? Thank you, Allison. Anybody in the public that would like to be heard on this item?
Yes, I have several members of the public. Let's wait. There it is. All right, this first one is Adrena. Adrena, you have 2 minutes and unmute yourselves.
Hello?
Yes, we got you.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment on this. What happens to a restaurant when they fail to meet health and safety requirements? They get shut down. What happens to a hospital if it's deemed unsanitary to even hold patients? They get shut down. What happens to any business that does not provide a safe environment for their employees? They all get shut down. Why do you favor this business above all businesses? A business who has a responsibility towards kids. If you go look up probation's job requirements and position on Indeed, the county website, it states they play a key crucial role for our community. And I agree, they serve our kids and it's up to them to push out quality kids, but they're failing at their job. And it goes to show they have unqualified applicants working there. And can we sit here today and say that's what they really do? Rehabilitate, treatment, an alternative towards incarceration. It is in fact incarceration, and it's a lie to the community. And they want to ask for another extension. You guys cut me off in the last board meeting when I try to give this statement. The definition of insanity is repeating the same mistakes over and over again, expecting different results. So I guess we must all be insane here to be running into the same brick wall and probation making a mockery out of everybody. This is a comment for taxpayers. How do you feel knowing your hardworking taxpayers' money that's meant to be placed towards treatment and programs and rehabilitation services for kids doesn't get spent on these resources? Improvidence, embezzlement, dereliction of duty. Where's the people's money? I actually wrote a letter to Washington, D.C. in regards to this. No church, no staff to allow kids to meet with their attorneys. These are major problems. You know, I'm the elected chairperson at Los Padrinos for LACO. They hadn't had a single LACO meeting regarding the
Adrena,
kids.
your 2 minutes is up. Please wrap up your thought.
They haven't had not one single meeting for LACO in regards to these children's education, and a bunch of parents have questions. We all remain unanswered. So that was just pretty much my comment. And it's just very disappointing comparing LA Juvenile Hall to Orange County. They put in a new rehabilitation center, an auto shop, a gym, and classrooms. Seems like all the counties took the money, invested into their facilities, while LA County invested into plastic chairs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have MJ Hart. And please unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, hello. I had expressed earlier my not only disheartening to learn the very unreasonable amount of time that has been just wasted away, I will say, with not fixing these non-compliance in these facilities. Every day that you are not holding these facilities accountable to the harm that they are doing in youth's lives and, you know, young adults' lives is another day that person is getting more traumatized. You know, it's very also discouraging that when you were just, I think your name's Katie, when you were just asked what accountability measures will be put in place when facilities like LA County and probation did not provide paperwork for what is obviously happening in their facilities. You just avoided the question. When you don't even have a date set up to go and tour the facility in LA County, I don't understand. The Attorney General had sued LA County and probation because of these same issues. So what is the special treatment with LA County? Another gentleman just said that you will make a determination in February with other facilities. Why not LA County? What's going on? As a survivor who does this work so that other children can stay safe and not happen to them, it's heartbreaking to know that people who are put in these positions of responsibility are not having the best interests of the youth. I don't understand, like the other person that just talked about insanity. It's insane. It is insane that over and over and over, these same issues are showing and showing and showing, and you're just allowing them extension after extension after extension. Legislation has been passed in law for a reason. Why are you giving special treatment to these facilities, especially LA County? Please do better. Prioritize the youth.
Your 2 minutes is up. Please wrap up your thought.
Just saying that I hope that y'all can really operate from humanity and love and really put these youth forward and hold people accountable, because we're watching and we're doing this work and we're trying to do it collectively, but we can't do it alone. And I just hope that y'all are moved here today to do what is right and hold the people accountable and make these changes for the youth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Israel. Israel, please unmute yourself.
Israel Villa, he, him, his, CYCJ, just echoing the same concerns, questions, and once again, very disheartened in regarding these non-compliant issues. And unfortunately, as we know, it's not just Los Angeles, there's very similar concerns in numerous counties. And it's just disheartening once again to see the BSCC's failure in holding some of these folks accountable. I hope that where Los Angeles is concerned, this does not turn into another 2-year fiasco like it was with Barry J. Nordoff. I hope that we get solutions much, much faster. I hope that it does not take another loss of a life of a young person, someone's child, to get y'all to take action. And honestly, I also want to just thank the board members who supporting community up there, really hearing us and really being willing to have conversations to collaborate and bring solutions. And then also just a comment outside of this board, really just hoping that at some point our administration gets involved, and specifically calling out Governor Newsom and Department of Justice and any others, legislators who might have staffers listening. We need help. We've been in crisis for years, overdoses continue. Some of our children have overdosed up to 6-7 times, while we continue with this bureaucracy while lives are at stake and lives are being lost in both the juvenile and adult facilities. Who, again, y'all are tasked with inspecting. Again, my public comment is just for Mr. Governor Newsom, once again, where you at, brother? We need some help. Our children need you. Our children are suffering. Our children are dying. Our children are being abused. State-sanctioned violence. And this board has often, perpetrated it. So I hope that at some point you uphold your moral obligation, and that is the safety and security of our children. Foremost. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no more public comments, Madam Chair.
Okay. We're at the portion of the meeting where we have public comments that may address any item on.
Sorry, Madam Chair, there was actually a request for a motion on that prior agenda item.
I apologize.
So again, just wrapping up the inspection update, what we're looking for is approval from the board to invite either of the both of the sheriffs of Los Angeles County and Alameda County to our February meeting if they remain out of compliance after reinspection next week.
Thank you, Allison, for the refresher. We have a motion. Any discussion? Can I get a motion in a second?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Adam?
Chair Penner,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mr. Dykes,
Aye.
Ms. Chavez,
Yes.
Mr. Haynes,
Aye.
Mr. Richard,
Aye.
Ms. Guard,
Aye.
Ms. Zaragoza,
Aye.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries.
Thank
Correct.
you. Thank you, Allison.
Just if I could, I'm sorry, I meant to make this comment before the vote, but I also just think whenever we do this, I hope it's a practice of ours now to alert the county executive and the chair of the board for the counties that we're inviting them.
It is a good idea. Thank you. We'll try this one more time. We're at the end of the agenda where anyone who would like to make a public comment about a matter pertaining to the board agenda today or any other item, it's your opportunity.
The current, oh, there it is. Give it a minute. Currently have 3 members on Zoom who wish to make a comment.
All right.
And the first one will be Sarah. Sarah, go ahead and unmute yourself. You have 2 minutes.
Hello. Again, my name is Sarah Vargas. I'm calling in from the San Fernando Valley. And I wanted to speak to the accessibility or the lack thereof with these meetings. We say we live in a democracy. We want to hear our community's voices, particularly since you serve or serve our communities. I don't think these meetings are accessible to folks who would like to come or even like just be present or listen or come to learn about how our processes work. A meeting that runs during a full workday. I also imagine this is your full workday. But I'm hoping that the accessibility to the communities that you're serving like is considered when you're planning these meetings. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have MJ Hart.
Yes, hello again. Thank you. I just wanted to finish my comment earlier about the director position for in custody deaths. I just wanted to express that I have some concerns about this position being filled by former law enforcement who may be now practicing medicine. In my both personal and professional experience, I have witnessed the detrimental impacts of having a former law enforcement in a position that is responsible for holding accountable those who are law enforcement. We've seen favoritism, people, coming with their implicit bias, not being objective in the situations. And I feel that it's best that I know they're appointed by the governor, but it's best to have some public forums, to have some input from the public to make sure that this director is actually having the best intentions for the, humans that are being placed in these facilities and not just contributing to the, same barriers that we are coming up against. And lastly, some type of time constraints with when harm is done to a youth so that it happens more faster than later, quickly than later, because the statute of limitations is not that long. And sometimes families, and God forbid, their child is killed. How are they going to have any restoration, any healing, if they can't even hold people accountable for the harm that was done? And lastly, I just really encourage all of y'all to remember that these are humans that you're making decisions about. Children, young adults. As someone who survived and deals with a lot of mental, emotional trauma and turmoil that I go to therapy every week for, these children are being traumatized every day. And every day that facilities are in non-compliance is another day that all of these harms are running rampant in those facilities. So please remember, these are humans and there needs to be urgency around it, of course, within the fine lines of
Your 2
and
minutes
just
is
thank
up,
you
so
all for
please wrap up your thought.
thank you. And thank you all for also working with the community, hearing us out, and working with the community members who have come forward to find the best practices and theories and everything around just how we're operating. And thank you for working with us so that this is a collective effort and you're, hearing our voices as well. And we look forward to seeing the changes come for the youth and the young adults. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Adrena. You have 2 minutes. Please.
I agree with the first person who made a comment stating that to make it more accessible for the public, I would love to attend one of these meetings in person just so I could get a personal, so I could know you guys personal and, just to hold those position. It's your job. It's your job to know the community and know them at a personal level rather than just sit there. It's what Queen Elizabeth did. She went out there and she got to know her people. And that's what is lacking here, what you guys don't really do. And it's kind of heartbreaking that I attend a lot of these meetings and I speak a lot for the youth, and it just seems like nobody cares at all about the people, about the kids, or anything we have to say. So maybe nobody asked you guys this question before, but I kind of want to know, and I want to answer too, as from a community member, is why? Why are you giving probation extensions? Why are you allowing this to happen to kids? Why do you continue for it to grow and escalate into an even bigger problem? Just why? Maybe that would help a community understand instead of just sitting here and asking questions and making statements. I want to know why. What is the reason? What is the purpose? What are we trying to achieve here? Because nothing gets done. And I would like to see you guys take your job seriously and get the job done. It's what you're supposed to do. And if you can't get the job done, then maybe it's time for us to elect new people to take your position to get the job done. And remember that the power and the voice belongs to the people. You serve us. You're a servant to the community, not a servant to yourselves. And that's what the important role of this is. And I would like to see the charity and people give back and be passionate about what they do. And it just lacks passion and it lacks empathy. Thank you.
Please finish.
Thank you.
There are no more public comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I think just quickly in a nutshell, I mean, we have a process, there is a statute, we have to comport with that. And so I just want to end the meeting by saying I don't think that should represent any lack of caring. We all care deeply, and we honor the law and the process that we're required to follow by the law, and that should not be construed as us being uncaring and unfeeling. And I will end with that. Anybody else have a comment? Thank you all. Next meeting is February 15th, 2024. I appreciate your time.